In the Chu clan mansion, the residence of the Duke of Bright Moon City, a young man was sleeping beside a beautiful woman. He stretches out his hand, calling her darling, but at that moment, a huge bolt of lightning cuts across the sky, causing a tremendous noise. The girl wakes up startled, asking Xuan what he's doing there, but the poor boy is also a little lost, asking if she really is the second young lady and where Chu Chuyan is. Suddenly, shouting begins outside, telling people to help immediately because the young master is in the second young lady's room. Still confused, Xuan asks himself what happened and how he ended up in the second young lady's room, but he decides to run away before something worse happens to him. As he runs desperately through the rain, he keeps questioning why he is there and how this happened. He ends up tripping in the middle of the forest, while some of the guards chasing him say there is no one on that side and that it seems the young master is not there. The protagonist keeps trying to run, thinking that if he is caught, he will be a dead man and will probably be forced to leave Bright Moon City. But suddenly, he receives a blow to the head and loses consciousness. A man remarks that this piece of trash really can run fast. An extremely powerful bolt of lightning strikes a tree. The man who had captured the protagonist had tied him precisely to that tree. He approaches, saying that it looks like everything is over, and that all he needs to do now is eliminate the evidence. The man says that on that night, after the protagonist was caught in his sister-in-law's bed on his wedding night, he managed to escape, but was killed by lightning as a form of divine retribution, since that kind of death seems more acceptable. The man removes the ropes and keeps laughing, saying he cannot tell whether the protagonist is very lucky or unlucky because an incompetent and useless man like him becoming the husband of the Duke's eldest daughter is indeed an enviable fate. However, after the protagonist entered a powerful clan like that, he accidentally became involved in the struggle for the throne of the great Zhou dynasty, so he is the only one to blame for his terrible destiny. But dying beneath the peony and becoming a ghost does have a poetic touch, even if the protagonist never had time to actually do it. In the real world, inside an apartment, the weather was also very gloomy, and heavy rain was falling. The protagonist at his computer was in the middle of an argument. Some people wanted to beat him up because of what had happened, but the protagonist remained calm, saying they could attack him if they could, since they were nothing but a bunch of cowards, and he was only getting started. But now he needed to show them how a person could truly act. As he continued arguing, a very strong glow and a sphere appeared beside him. He becomes a little frightened, questioning what that is. The intensity grows stronger and stronger, and the protagonist realizes that his body is being paralyzed. But something unbelievable is still about to happen. He begins to be sucked into that sphere and simply appears as if he is in the universe, completely lost and unable to understand what happened to him. Suddenly, a voice congratulates him, and the protagonist becomes even more frightened, asking who said that. The voice continues, saying that he has successfully linked the Keyboard Warrior account after fulfilling the necessary conditions. Because of this, the keyboard system functions will be unlocked. The protagonist still does not understand anything that is happening there and asks what Keyboard Warrior is and what unlocking functions means. Although the title Keyboard Warrior fits his personality perfectly, it is still a little strange to hear it. The system asks him to collect the secret manuals from the 12 inaccessible regions of that world and then incorporate them into the function keys from F1 to F12. Each time he collects a manual, one system function will be unlocked. The protagonist remains surprised as he sees his own keyboard and asks how it ended up like that. The system simply wishes the keyboard warrior good luck. But the protagonist asks the system to wait a second and questions what the 12 inaccessible regions are and how he is supposed to find those secret manuals. Besides that, there is something even more important. He asks where he is and how he can get out of there. But suddenly the sphere appears behind him again and takes him somewhere else. The protagonist loses consciousness, but starts hearing some voices saying that the coroner has arrived and that the poor man was struck directly by lightning, making it impossible to even see who he is. Some people ask if he is not the man chosen by the Duke's eldest daughter to be her husband. Others say that it really seems to be him because they heard yesterday that on his wedding night he was caught in bed with his sister-in-law, so after that, there is no need to examine the body anymore since that shameless man got the fate he deserved. The coroner says the body was carbonized, the hands are loose, the eyes and mouth are still wide open, and the body has red and purple streaks, but the flesh is relatively unharmed. These are all symptoms of someone who was indeed struck by a very strong electric discharge. A boy says this is only expected from Lee's forensic skill, considered the strongest. The coroner thanks him for the compliment, saying they can rule out homicide. But suddenly the protagonist gets up coughing, frightening everyone and even causing some people to run away, saying that it is possible he turned into a zombie. The protagonist thinks that was truly horrible. Still frightened, the coroner asks what kind of bizarre demon the protagonist is. But the protagonist looks at the coroner and wonders what kind of strange clothes they are wearing. Besides that, it also seems like they are not speaking Chinese. even though he can understand the language perfectly. This makes the protagonist think that maybe he did not die, but instead transmigrated to another world. But suddenly he remembers that he just heard that the previous owner of that body spent his wedding night in his sister-in-law's bed, and apparently, this is a great beginning. The coroner and his companion shout, saying Miss Chu-Yan has just arrived. The protagonist is impressed when he sees that she is very beautiful, but Shuer, irritated by that situation, asks how he did not die because that is a pity, and apparently the gods do not want to waste a bolt of lightning on him. Zuan thinks this is a huge coincidence, because the former owner of that body was also named Zuan. Besides that, it seems like he was a very unlucky person in his life. Shuer asks him what is wrong and whether he became stupid after receiving that electric shock, questioning if he is now going to claim that he does not remember everything he did last night. Chu-Yan asks Shuer to stop because, no matter what, the protagonist is still her uncle by marriage. Shuer apologizes to the young lady, saying she was wrong. The protagonist is shocked to discover that the beauty before his eyes, so perfect that she seems to have stepped out of a painting, is actually the wife of the poor man who owned that body, which now means she has become his wife. Everyone around them is impressed because there are no words to describe Chu-Yan's beauty. The protagonist throws himself onto the ground and crawls toward his wife, asking her what her name is, because he heard she chose him to be her husband, and apparently she has excellent taste. Shuer gets angry once again, saying the protagonist got married only a few hours ago, but still cannot remember his own wife's name. Zuan hugs her legs, saying he already knew she would be sad to see him in that state, so he thought of telling a joke to ease the tension. Shuer kicks the protagonist's head, asking where he is rubbing himself, and questions whether he has forgotten the rules and does not know his place. Zuan asks her to stop that because he is also her master. Chu-Yan asks the protagonist why she should be sad for him, and turns around saying that if he can move, then he should simply follow her back home. The two women get into the carriage, and the exhausted protagonist thinks that girl did not help him at all, so he needs to teach her a lesson when they return. But Shuer tells the man driving the carriage to go. The protagonist shouts that he has not gotten in yet, but irritated, he gathers his strength and quickly climbs inside. Zuan thinks that girls' thighs are beautiful and that it is a pity he cannot sit on them. He throws himself beside her, making her even more nervous. Zuan looks at his wife and realizes she is reading a book called Sweet Pampered Wife, 99 Tips for Pursuing the Love of a Diamond and Mortal Wife. A little embarrassed, Chu-Yan quickly hides the book and tells Shuer not to mind it and to let the protagonist stay inside the carriage. She asks if he saw anything just now, but he notices that she became uncomfortable and says no, turning his face away. He decides to take advantage of the situation and asks his wife if she has ever heard of a place called the Inaccessible Regions, and if she has, which one is closest to home. Zaire once again interrupts the conversation, asking where he heard about the 12 inaccessible regions, and the protagonist says he heard someone mention it casually, but she does not believe him, saying that is impossible. Chu-Yan points out that it does not matter where he heard about it, but he must not ask about that subject again in the future. As soon as they arrive, the protagonist asks why he cannot enter through the main gate. Zhuir explains that the main gate is reserved exclusively for members of the Chu clan, so how could a useless son-in-law like him possibly be qualified to use it? Besides, she's afraid the protagonist will bring bad luck to the clan by passing through the main entrance. Zuan says she has a very nasty mouth, so he can bet her boyfriend has a serious case of herpes. This makes her furious, but before she can even hit him, the protagonist throws himself down pretending he had been beaten. She asks what that was, since she did not even touch him. Chu-Yan scolds Zhuir, saying she's being far too reckless, and that no matter what happens, the protagonist is still the son-in-law of the Chu clan, so in the future she must not treat him the same way. Zuan smiles, since that is exactly what he wanted. Chu-Yan asks if he is alright and tells him to stop wasting time, because her father and mother are already waiting inside. He says he is fine and jumps up to try to hug her, thinking he already knew she cared a lot about him, but she simply dodges. Shuer steps in front of him again, saying the protagonist is still acting as if nothing happened last night, so she is even more eager to see what the master and madam will do to him. Zuan throws himself onto the ground once again, and Shuer remains confused, asking the young lady what is wrong with him now. Chu-Yan points out that she heard the protagonist was struck by lightning that night, so perhaps he really is not feeling very well. Zuan thinks it is as if he started a game on infernal difficulty, so pretending to be injured is the only way. That way, he can use this time to think of something. Chu-Yan asks someone to take the protagonist back home and let him rest for a while because she will inform her parents about what happened. Zuan closes his eyes and someone begins carrying him, saying they should leave him on that bench for now and that they will fetch some clean water to wash him. As soon as they leave, the protagonist gets up and goes to the water to see his reflection. He points out that it is no wonder they do not care about him, since his face is completely messed up because of that lightning strike, and he cannot even bear to look at himself. Suddenly, Zhuir kicks him in the back and knocks him into the water. While he is underwater, he wonders what is happening and whether someone is trying to kill him. He thinks it is likely the clan is embarrassed by what happened, so they decided to use an accident to get rid of a useless son-in-law. He starts swimming and goes up, calling for help. But as soon as he surfaces, he sees Zhuir by the edge of the water, laughing. He wonders why she wants to kill him, thinking this must be some kind of scheme his wife planned with a secret lover, so he needs to pretend to be dead. Zhuir grabs a stick, pokes the protagonist, and asks if he really died and whether she managed to get rid of things so easily. She pulls him out of the water to check whether he is truly dead or just unconscious. But as soon as she gets distracted, he grabs her foot and drags her into the water. She starts struggling to get out, and as soon as she reaches the surface, she uses one of her abilities to hold onto a tree, but the protagonist remains even stronger and pulls her down. Once she loses consciousness, the protagonist takes her out of the water and looks at her, thinking that those eyelashes and that small mouth are truly a pity because her tongue is extremely poisonous, and it would be wonderful if she were mute. However, he does not know what he should do now because someone in the mansion wants to eliminate him, and it is very dangerous for him to keep living there. However, he has no idea where he could go, since he does not know anyone or anything in that world. Besides, the former owner of that body committed a very shameful act last night, and if he runs away, he will probably be hunted as a criminal, and his death will come even faster. But suddenly he realizes that if someone is trying to make his death look like an accident, it means that person is afraid to eliminate him openly. Zhuan looks at Zhuir and asks why she still has not moved after so long. He starts getting frightened, asking if she's going to die because he does not want to be treated like a murderer. As soon as he gets close to her chest, he realizes there is no heartbeat. He tries to revive her, telling her not to die because he does not know what he will do if that happens. Chuyan walks over to them and asks what he is doing. The protagonist turns around in fright and asks if she would believe him if he said he was trying to save her life. His wife simply tells him to move aside, and as soon as she begins the resuscitation, the protagonist is impressed because he did not know his wife was also a martial arts master. He asks if she is a martial arts master and wonders why she cannot teach him, since he has the qualifications. Chuyan points out that it is already too late because he is already an adult man. Besides, his talent is only D class. She also points out that, as she already said before, in their marriage, he can only call her Miss Chu or Chuyan, and in the future, he must not refer to her with those two terms he just used. The protagonist says he understands and calls her darling once again. Zhuir begins to wake up, and Chuyan asks if she's all right and what exactly happened there. The protagonist thinks a servant would not dare try to eliminate him. So whoever is behind this is truly a mystery. He even suspects his own wife, but in truth, it could be anyone. So it is better to keep up appearances for now until he figures out what the hell is going on there. And to do that, he explains to his wife that he ended up tripping and falling into the lake. Zhuir saw it and tried to save him, but accidentally slipped and fell as well. Fortunately, the protagonist knows how to swim, even if very poorly, and barely managed to save her. Chuyan asks if that is really what happened, and Zhuir simply agrees. Chuyan says Zhuir is soaked and tells her to take a bath, change clothes, and then go eat with her. Zhuan asks Zhuir where she is going to bathe and whether he could go with her, but she says she would not do that even if it cost her life. During the night, the protagonist approaches the house and hears the two of them talking. Zhuir asks Chuyan if she would like to eat some sunflower seeds. Chuyan says no, and points out that she should not eat too many either, since she might end up breaking her teeth. Zhuan thinks his wife is waiting for him inside, but before he can enter, he hears Zhuir saying that he is becoming more and more difficult to deal with because he used to be very quiet, but today he seemed completely different. The protagonist is surprised and thinks that maybe he was right to believe his wife truly wanted to kill him. Chuyan agrees with Zhuir, saying the protagonist really was a little different and that perhaps the lightning strike messed up his head a bit. Zhuir asks why the young lady did not confront the protagonist about what happened last night. Chuyan explains that the events of last night were very bizarre and she needs to discuss it with her parents tomorrow before deciding what to do. Still irritated, Zhuir asks why the lightning did not eliminate that guy, because if that had happened, the young lady would no longer need to waste time with that piece of trash. Chuyan scolds her again, saying she must not say that kind of thing again. But at that moment, the protagonist kicks the door open and his wife is surprised, asking what he is doing there. Zhuan explains that it is dark, so what else could he be doing there? Obviously, he is going to his bed. Chuyan asks who said he could sleep inside. The protagonist points out that it is only natural for a husband to sleep with his wife, but Chuyan kicks him in the face, sending him flying away. Zhuir starts laughing, saying the protagonist is nothing but an idiot, and asks why he does not kiss the floor and then stare at his own reflection in it, because apparently he has forgotten who he really is, thinking he can approach the young lady. Zhuan gets up and says this is exactly what he expected. Shuer finds the situation a little strange and asks if the lightning really fried his brain. Zuan thinks he is now certain that the previous owner of that body never consummated the marriage. He planned that little scene to test a theory that has just been confirmed, which means he can start from scratch with his wife. Chuyan asks if he is alright. Zuan also realizes that for some reason, his wife does not want that information to spread. He gets up and starts shouting, telling everyone to listen to how much injustice is happening, because he has never heard of a wife refusing to sleep with her own husband. Chuyan runs over to him, covers his mouth, tells him to stop talking, and then closes the doors. The protagonist starts licking her hand and she pulls away, saying, "That is disgusting." Zuan asks why she married him if she does not want to sleep in the same bed, because tomorrow he will start a huge commotion in the streets, gather a troop of drummers, and announce the truth for everyone to hear. That way, he can see whether the clan's reputation will be ruined or his own will. Chuyan says he does not have the courage to dare do that. The protagonist walks over to the table and sits down, asking why not, since his reputation is already completely ruined anyway, and he is not afraid of making it even worse. Besides, he asks if she also does not want the other rich young masters to know that she is pure and untouched. Chuyan gets irritated and asks if he really wants to sleep with her. He is surprised, wondering if she really agreed to him just because he said that, and says yes. Chuyan says she will allow Zhuer to keep him company that night. The two of them are shocked by this, because no one expected that reaction from her. Zhuer asks the young miss if she is joking, but Chuyan, irritated, asks what is going on and whether she is unwilling, since the protagonist's hands were all over her during the day when he saved her life. Besides, this is a task that is part of the responsibilities of any live-in maid, and she asks if Zhuer is not willing. Zhuer does not know what to say, and the protagonist, also surprised, wonders what kind of absurdity this is since his wife is pushing another woman into her own husband's bed. Besides, Zhuer had tried to kill him during the day, but they can play along and see what the relationship between those two is like. Chuyan continues scolding Zhuer, saying that apparently she has been far too generous with her, and she is forgetting her true place. Zhuer apologizes to her mistress, saying that all of this is her own fault and says she can go along with that idea because she will pretend she is being bitten by a dog. The protagonist gets excited, telling her to just wait until he awakens every part of her. He thinks he does not need to care about this, because if they, as women, are not ashamed, then he should not be either. And if the two of them want to play this way, that is fine with him. He will play along until the end and see who gives in first. Chuyan only watches from outside while thinking about who the spy in the Chu clan could be, hoping it is not Zhuer. A short while later, a scream is heard from inside. The protagonist is completely desperate, asking how this can be happening to him. Zhuer only laughs, saying she used to think he was just a nobody, but now she realizes she had greatly overestimated him. It turns out he is not even a real man, and she is almost dying from laughter. With his masculinity completely destroyed, the protagonist leaves the room, asking what is happening to him. Chuyan is embarrassed when she sees that her husband is still naked, but the protagonist simply ignores everything and continues walking alone through the night, thinking that it does not matter whether this is hard mode or infernal mode. There has to be a way to put an end to all of this. However, he has no idea what the point of this is, since he might as well just die, because nothing in this life has any meaning. Suddenly, a strange man appears behind the protagonist, explaining that his happiness has been affected by a unique sealing spell, but it is not impossible to undo it. Zuan looks at the man and asks about the sealing spell and who placed a sealing spell on him. He also asks if this man really has a solution for it. The protagonist thinks it might be his wife, but judging by her previous behavior, that does not seem to be the case. The man tosses something to the protagonist so he can get dressed and says he does not know either, but he imagines the seal was placed on him when he was only a child. Otherwise, he would not be impotent. As for the solution, the seal is located in a sensitive and extremely delicate area, so removing it with external force could easily cause damage. Zuan asks if the man is Milao because previously that old man was the servant responsible for gardening tasks in the mansion, and in the past his work was ordinary, such as watering flowers, planting grass, and sweeping the floor. So how could he have become a monk? The protagonist insists, begging and pleading for his senior to help him and give him some advice on how to solve this. Milao explains that the protagonist will have to rely on his own strength to remove it. Once his cultivation reaches the master realm and his ki becomes spiritual, he will naturally have the ability to remove it. But Zuan is surprised and asks if it really has to be the master realm. Milao notices that the protagonist is a little upset and asks if he really understood everything. Zuan says yes, however, he heard that unfortunately he has no talent and is already an adult. So how can he possibly reach the master realm? He tries to run away, saying he would rather die than live like that. Milao grabs him, asking what the rush is. Indeed, it is useless for the protagonist to train using ordinary techniques, however. He possesses an ancient and peculiar technique that he obtained in his early days, and it should be perfect for the protagonist. Xuan thinks about the word peculiar because, as everyone knows, the stranger a technique is, the more abnormal its effect tends to be, like the Sunflower Manual or the Evil Sword. He asks the old man what is so peculiar about that technique. Milao explains that to master everything, what the protagonist needs to do is get beaten. The more he gets beaten, the easier it will be for his strength to increase. The protagonist does not like the idea very much, asking why such a ridiculous technique still exists in that world because he still prefers to die. However, he thinks that old man is very cautious because he wants to pass one of his best techniques to the protagonist instead of using it himself. But in the end, it seems that this does not matter much since he has no other choice. Milao shouts at the protagonist asking whether he wants to train with this technique or not, and the protagonist ends up agreeing, thinking that either way, it is worth trying for the sake of his little friend, who is dead for now. Milao throws a scroll to the protagonist. This makes Xuan a little hesitant to accept it, and he tells the old man that the two of them are not relatives and have never met before. So why is he being so kind? Milao explains that the truth is he does not have much time left and does not want this technique to be buried along with him. But Milao was actually planning something much worse. He thinks that finally, after so many years, he has found a suitable body, and after the protagonist reaches the Master Realm, he will get rid of that boy and possess his body. That way, he will be able to take everything the protagonist has, even his wife. The protagonist looks at the scroll and gets irritated, preparing to throw it away while shouting that he would have to be a complete idiot to believe what that old man is saying. But before he can do that, the system appears, saying that it has detected the secret mountain scroll called the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra. The system asks whether he wishes to consume the scroll to activate a keyboard function. Still lost, the protagonist asks what kind of nonsense that is, but the system continues asking whether he wishes to consume it to activate a keyboard function or not, and the protagonist says yes. Suddenly, the scroll begins to be consumed by the system itself, and another screen appears reading, Secret Manual Consumed. The keyboard ahead begins to form, and a small girl appears saying that the first secret manual has been obtained. All he has to do is press the F2 key to activate it. This means he has found his first secret manual and activated the rage system. Part of the lottery reward system is now available to him. Xuan asks the system girl if she is really talking to him, and if he is not dreaming, then starts squeezing her. The girl hits him on the head, telling him to let go of her immediately. She explains that since the user activated a keyboard function for the first time, he will receive 3 lottery tickets that cost 100 rage points each. He can use the 3 tickets for free, and the probability of winning something with each ticket has been significantly increased. The rewards are random, and in the future, all rewards from these lotteries will be based on the user's level. The protagonist remains confused, asking if this is some kind of new user bonus, and decides to accept and play. As soon as he presses the button, some keys on the keyboard begin to glow and stop on the letter Q. The system congratulates the protagonist, saying he won the Heiress's Ball of Delight. She explains that this item does not reduce the actual amount of damage he receives, and any pain inflicted on him by a richer woman will transform into pure happiness. And if that rich woman happens to inflict lethal damage, he will not die, but will be left with one final drop of life. The protagonist says that item is absolutely useless. The system asks whether he wishes to store that item in his item bar. That way, he can use it whenever he wants by simply pressing the Q key. Then it asks if he wants to continue playing the lottery. The protagonist says yes and presses the button again. This time, the letter drawn is B. He managed to win a dagger called Poison Sting, and the protagonist asks if it could be an item that deals 999 points of damage in a single strike. The system girl keeps laughing, saying the protagonist's imagination is truly hilarious. The girl explains that once a man accidentally licked that dagger when victory was already within his grasp. That action cost him his life, and before dying, the man's final words were poison sting, which is why it is a cursed weapon, and anyone wounded by it will die immediately. The protagonist becomes a little happy, saying he finally got something good. That dagger is comparable to a magical weapon, however. The name is a little too frightening. And as for licking a poisonous dagger, only stupid people would do something like that. However, his own body was almost licking the dagger. The system calls the protagonist's attention, and he is surprised because he cannot believe that the dagger makes people unconsciously try to lick it. But he decides to play the lottery one last time. As soon as he presses it, the system thanks him for playing. He gets irritated, asking if they call that a high probability of being drawn again. He tries to press it one more time, but the system warns him that the bonus has already ended. This makes him irritated, and he keeps pressing the button. The system tries to warn him that his rage points are insufficient and that he needs 100 rage points to play the lottery. His current rage points are 0, so it is unable to perform any more draws. The system girl hits him on the head, asking if he is blind or an idiot, and tells him not to keep pressing the button. Zuan says that system is very fierce and asks where that incredible magical system is, because if this only depends on points, he can easily earn them with Shuir's help. Suddenly, he remembers that he let the system consume the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra, and the sexual happiness of his little friend needs to return. He remembers that this was exactly when the system appeared. He starts shouting for the system to return the sexual happiness of his life and presses the buttons. The system girl says that everything is fine there and asks the protagonist to think about it. Suddenly, a new message appears for him, asking if he wishes to train in the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra. He's happy to see that the secret manual is still there and taps the yes option. A large amount of energy begins to take over his body, leaving the protagonist a little frightened as he asks what is happening to him and what that warm feeling is. Because suddenly, the air has become sweeter and fresher, and the world also seems more vibrant. He feels that his entire body is overflowing with power. The system points out that the user has successfully trained in the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra. In addition, the user has also managed to channel ki into his own body. Each time the user fills one of the 9 energy stars, he will advance 1 stage. He asks how he channeled ki into his body and whether this is the cultivation model of that world. He looks at the tree, thinking that now he feels full of power and tries to punch it. His punch has indeed improved quite a lot, and because of that, he is able to cause a small amount of damage to the tree. However, his hand still hurts a lot. A short while later, he says that apparently the system really does seem useful because he can see his cultivation level in that world. The system girl says he is right, but he still is not very happy because that idiotic technique truly requires him to get hurt in order to increase his level. He thinks that he just tried throwing a few punches, but the effect was not that great. The golden energy gathered was not very high, and all he needs to do is fill each sphere to increase the technique's level and his strength. This means he cannot even train by himself, and it seems the only option is for someone else to beat him. Suddenly, his little sister-in-law bangs hard on the door and calls the protagonist, leaving him surprised. She puts her foot on the table, asking who he is calling sister-in-law, because she has no idea what her older sister was thinking by bringing the protagonist back and not even punishing him for what he did. Zuan only stares at her, thinking she is a very adorable girl. The system says he successfully provoked Chu Huanchao and obtained 10 rage points. She asks the protagonist what the hell he is looking at since he is just a dog. The rage points continue increasing. The protagonist realizes that this little girl seems to have a terrible temper, and he would be a fool not to take this chance to earn some rage points. He tells her that, to be honest, he has a question and needs to get it off his chest. She asks what question it is. Zuan says her older sister has a very beautiful name, like Chu Yan, so why did her parents give her such a horrible name? This makes her so angry that the protagonist manages to earn 666 rage points. Huanzhao explains that the name Chu Yan was chosen by her own sister because her real name was Zhaodi. The protagonist is surprised because he did not expect a cheap-looking wife with such a nice appearance to have a village girl's name. The protagonist says he understands now and asks why she does not change her own name too. She says she wants to, but her parents will not allow it, and neither will her sister, even though her sister was able to change her own name. However, she does not give a damn about anyone. The protagonist remains happy, seeing that her anger is rising very quickly. Huanzhao shouts for the protagonist to stop trying to befriend her, because she still has a score to settle with him over what happened last night. The protagonist asks what score that is and points out that last night was just a misunderstanding. Huanzhao shouts that he climbed into her bed, so how could that possibly be a misunderstanding? The protagonist asks why she did not stop him, since she could have called the guards or something like that. Besides, she is still just a child, so how could he think obscene things about her? Huanzhao curses the protagonist, saying she is already an adult. But the protagonist keeps irritating her, saying that if she keeps staring and shouting like that, no one will want to marry her in the future. Besides, her little... But before he can continue speaking, she rushes forward and punches him in the face, sending him flying far away. She points out that for a moment, she thought he might actually have some ability, given how determined he is to irritate her, but in the end, he is just a weakling. She whistles, calling bootlicker. The protagonist cannot understand how such a young girl already has a bootlicker, and apparently the men of that world are all sissies. But what enters is actually not a man, but a huge dog. She closes the doors and starts laughing, and the protagonist becomes a little terrified by it. Huanzhao orders Bootlicker to bite that piece of trash, and the dog immediately runs after the protagonist, who tries to get away. They run around the table, but the girl curses her own dog, saying he is a stupid mutt, and asks why he needs to keep chasing the protagonist around the table when he just has to jump over it and solve the problem. The dog obeys and climbs onto the table, trying to attack the protagonist. He opens his keyboard and thinks this is not going to end very well. He presses the B key, takes out his dagger, and with a single strike manages to defeat the dog, asking if it really died. Huanzhao goes over to her dog and calls Bootlicker's name, asking what is wrong with him, but when she sees that the dog does not respond, she looks at the protagonist and asks how he had the courage to kill him. Xuan only laughs, saying that now she knows what he is capable of, but this only makes her even angrier. She grabs a whip, saying he will pay for Bootlicker's death, and strikes him with it. However, it is not just the wound, as it causes an even greater pain effect. He starts rolling from side to side, saying it hurts a lot. Huanzhao asks if the protagonist is scared now, because her older sister was worried about others bullying her, so she found that unique weapon for her. The name of that weapon is the Whip of Lamentation. When hit by it, enemies feel pain 10 times greater than normal, and no one can endure such pain. The protagonist thinks that technique really is trash and asks the system if it is possible for him to increase his level several times later, but the system girl only smiles, saying that he will have to see that with his own eyes later. Huanzhao sits in a chair and says she would like to make a bet with the protagonist. If he can take 3 strikes from her whip without screaming in agony, then she will not blame him for Bootlicker's death. He thinks that girl is very perverted because he is a serious man, but she wants him to do other things. However, he decides to accept, but he asks her to wait just 1 minute because he needs to prepare himself. He takes the other item he won and asks how it works and whether he needs to rub it. The system girl says he just needs to rub it on any part of his skin. Huanzhao keeps pressuring him, asking if he is still not ready because she does not want to keep wasting time. The protagonist rubs the item on his arm, opens his arms, says he is ready now, and tells her to begin. As soon as she lands another strike on him, he starts wondering what he should do, because he can barely stop himself from moaning. Huanzhao, like a true torturer, asks what is going on and tells him to scream, because there is no need to hold back. However, the protagonist prepares himself and tells her to quickly give him 2 more lashes. Huanzhao starts getting confused, wondering how someone can endure the pain of the Whip of Lamentation. In his imagination, the protagonist is standing before a door and asks if that is the door to a new world of sensations. Huanzhao, who had already given him 2 more lashes on the butt, becomes a little upset, asking how that is possible and whether her whip really broke. The protagonist gets up and asks if he won. Huanzhao asks him to whip her once, and the protagonist asks if she is really serious. Huanzhao tells him to stop talking nonsense and hit her already. However, he cannot hit her face. Xuan tells her to lie down on the table and show her butt a little. As soon as he lands the first strike with the whip, she falls to her knees on the floor, screaming that it hurts a lot. The protagonist says he hit her very lightly, but she did the opposite, using all the strength she had. Huanzhao, still unable to understand and almost crying to death, asks why he did not scream in pain since it hurt so much. But the protagonist points out that a real man never screams in pain. This leaves her surprised. She says that apparently she underestimated him and accepts defeat, saying that he won and therefore will not be blamed for Bootlicker's death. Xuan asks her not to leave yet and asks her to whip him a few more times. This makes her a little confused, but the protagonist changes his approach, suggesting another bet because if he wins again, then she will no longer be allowed to criticize him for climbing into her bed last night. But she simply refuses and keeps leaving. The protagonist points out that if he loses, then he will lick her feet and shoes, so she should think a little more carefully about it. When the night is very long and she is in a very bad mood, it would be nice to have a little fun. He lies down on the table again and asks her to give him a few more lashes. She points out that he is very perverted, but ends up accepting the bet. She keeps hitting him, however, the protagonist does not show any kind of pain. She asks if it really does not hurt, and he says it does, but once again points out that a real man never screams in pain. Huanzhao decides to leave, and the protagonist asks her not to go yet, suggesting one more bet, but she refuses, saying she cannot do it anymore. The protagonist asks her to wait and says that if he wins again, then she will have to call him brother-in-law from now on, and if he happens to lose, he will be her slave for a year. She ends up agreeing again, but quickly gives up. The protagonist tells her that there are still 2 lashes left. Huanzhao was dragging her poor dog, saying she already knew the protagonist was just a pervert, so she will stop there. He says that is fine, however, she needs to remember to call him brother-in-law in the future. Milao appears beside him again, impressed, saying that he really managed to reach the 3rd step of the 2nd stage. In addition, he is also almost at the peak of the 3rd step. Xuan is surprised to see him and asks how long he has been watching there, but the old man simply says that apparently the Whip of Lamentation is a formidable weapon. Besides, the protagonist's pain resistance somehow amplifies its effectiveness. Xuan thinks that old man was spying on him, but decides to ask what he meant by the 3rd step of the 2nd stage. But suddenly he feels an extremely strong pain throughout his entire body. The system warns him that the usage time of the heiress's ball of delight has expired, and he still has 2 uses remaining. He begins to lose consciousness because of the absurd pain taking over his whole body. The old man takes him inside and places him on a bed, while wondering how he managed to endure the agony inflicted by the whip of lamentation. But now it is clear that the protagonist was using his great willpower to resist, which shows that his mind is quite admirable. Zuan was only thinking that the faster he practices, the less time he will have to wait before returning home. The old man looks at him and places 2 medicines beside the protagonist, saying that one bottle must be applied externally and the other must be ingested. In addition, he must spend the next few days recovering. The protagonist calls the old man elder, saying that he truly does not know how to thank him. Milao, with a smile on his face, tells him not to worry because he will find out very soon. As soon as the old man leaves, the protagonist opens his keyboard and laughs, saying that he obtained a total of 1,444 rage points, which means he can play the lottery 14 times. While he is using the system, Shuer is spying from outside, wondering if that boy really went crazy. But as soon as she sees the injuries, she realizes it was because of the whip of lamentation. This makes her happy, thinking that that waste of a person received so many lashes that he definitely will not survive. And that is actually better because if the protagonist dies because of that whip, her work will be done. Since if she acts personally, she risks exposing herself too much. She returns to her room and starts writing a letter to the young master, saying that there is nothing for him to worry about because the young miss remains pure and untainted, since the 2 of them still have not shared a room together. In addition, she believes she will be able to get rid of the protagonist very soon, so she hopes to send good news. She also points out in the letter that she may be overthinking things. However, she feels that the young miss harbors suspicions against her, so she asks her young master not to take too long to fulfill his mission. As soon as she finishes writing the letter, she takes a carrier pigeon and releases it, asking it to deliver the message to her young master. Meanwhile, the protagonist had already played several times, but was still dragging himself across the floor. The system girl asks what exactly he is trying to do, since he is on the verge of death. However, the protagonist went to the water to wash his hands. She asks why he is doing that, and he points out that she will never understand. With his hands clean, he uses Emperor Possession and presses once again. The system congratulates him, saying he won the S-rank Faith in Brother Spring. The protagonist is happy, saying that it is similar to healing potions in video games on Earth. The girl explains that in the incomprehensibly ancient cosmos, a famous saying has existed for a very long time. Have faith in Brother Spring and you will gain eternal life. That bottle will quickly restore his health while he is still alive. Even the most fatal wounds will be healed, and he will regain all of his health. While drinking the potion, he plays once more. He wins a marrow cleansing pill, and the system explains that the pill will cleanse and refine his marrow, drastically improving the overall quality of his body and increasing his gains. The protagonist takes the pill, saying that this is great. She asks him to respect the system and let her finish the introduction, but he simply eats the pill, saying it is very good. Suddenly, his entire body begins to change, and he shouts that he feels as if he is about to break through. The system points out that the host qualifications have improved. Suddenly, he begins to recover all the memories of the previous owner of the body, seeing that the clan patriarch holds the title of Duke within the empire. Bright Moon City is his fief, and the clan has a total of 3 children. The eldest son is named Yuzhao, the eldest daughter is Chuyan, and the youngest is Huanzhao. The protagonist discovers that the previous owner of that body was only an orphaned commoner, raised by his uncle and aunt. But the good part of all this is that he is so handsome that his face cannot be described with words. However, he still does not know why a powerful clan in Bright Moon City would accept such a useless person as their son-in-law, so obviously there must be a conspiracy happening. Suddenly, someone throws water on him and asks why he still has not gotten up, because it is already time to rise and the master and madam are waiting for him in the ancestral hall. Completely irritated, he gets up, asking if it was Diao Yang who threw water on him. Diao Yang asks what the protagonist will do if it was him, questioning whether the protagonist really thinks he is one of the masters of the mansion, because he has no idea what the young miss saw in him. Diao Yang continues questioning the protagonist, asking why he is staring so much, and if he wants to hit him, then he should just hit him. Zuan punches Diao Yang in the face and asks what is wrong with that world and why everyone keeps asking the protagonist to hit them. Diao Yang, with his face injured, becomes furious and prepares to grab his sword, saying he will eliminate that bastard immediately. Suddenly, the captain appears, asking what is going on there. Diao Yang tells the captain that they went there to escort the protagonist to the ancestral hall, but he refused to get up and even used his status as son-in-law to beat them. And the proof is that his nose is broken. The captain says that everyone is waiting in the ancestral hall while he stops speaking and is surprised to see that the protagonist's injuries are from the whip of lamentation. The protagonist says yes and points out that he is badly injured and cannot get out of bed. The captain points out that it does not matter whether he is injured or not because everyone in the ancestral hall is getting impatient, so they cannot waste any more time. He asks someone to bring a stretcher to take him to the ancestral hall because the truth about what happened will soon be revealed. He is taken to the ancestral hall on a stretcher. Pei Man, Chuyun's best friend, was also present, and the protagonist is impressed by her wicked presence. The madam asks the protagonist if he knows exactly why he is there. He says yes and points out that it is because he climbed into his sister-in-law's bed on his wedding night. The madam slams the cup on the table and says he is extremely ill-mannered, asking if he is proud of doing something so horrible. The system says he successfully provoked Qin Wanru and obtained 254 rage points. Xuan opens his shirt saying that is not the case, because he knows he deserves the punishment of 1,000 deaths for committing such a despicable and beastly act. Precisely because of that, he allowed the second young miss to whip him with the whip of lamentation and finally obtained her forgiveness. Wanru says that this is ridiculous behavior, but the Duke tells his wife that the protagonist has already been punished by Huan Zhao, so it is better to let it go. However, Chu Tisheng tells his older brother that he has to disagree. He points out that they probably do not know how many rumors are currently spreading. Everyone is saying that Brat grabbed both sisters at the same time, and if he is not punished, they will only be fueling the spread of those malicious rumors even more. Besides, the clan has always taken pride in the strictness of its rules, and nothing this ugly has ever been seen before. If they do nothing, the clan will fall into disgrace. Huan Zhao enters the ancestral hall and asks her second uncle what he is talking about, because it is not as if the protagonist did anything to her that night. Tisheng points out that he naturally believes that as well. However, he does not know what people outside the clan think about the matter. The Duke shouts at his daughter, asking what she's doing there, and orders her to go back inside immediately. Wanru tells him to stop shouting at her, because he cannot yell at a child like that. She calls Huan Zhao, telling her not to listen to her father, and asks her to sit beside her mother and explain exactly what happened. She says that it is true she used the whip of lamentation to strike the protagonist last night. However, he did not scream, even after being hit several times. Besides, she also agreed to forgive him for everything he did, and does not want to go back on her word, so they should not punish him. She said all of this with tears in her eyes. Her mother becomes proud, saying she is a wonderful girl, and tells her she does not need to cry. Huan Zhao looks at Xuan and winks at him, showing that she did her part. He thanks her and thinks that, although she has a sadistic side, at least she is honest. Chu Yuepo, the Duke's third brother, tells his niece that she is still far too young to understand how this wicked world truly works. Since she is not even married yet, she should think about what these rumors will do to her reputation in the future. Because if this news continues to spread, it will turn everything into a huge scandal. Myeonman tells Chuyan that the whip of lamentation increases the pain inflicted tenfold, so perhaps the protagonist is an expert who has been hiding his true abilities. Chuyan says that is impossible since he does not even know how to use martial arts, so how could he be an expert? Disheng tells the Duke and the first madam that everyone there knows how powerful the whip of lamentation is, because even the two of them would find it difficult to endure 8 lashes. So how did an ordinary person like him manage to do it? Diao Yang takes the opportunity and informs the patriarch that when he went to call the protagonist earlier, he also hit him with enough force to break his nose. It is impossible for him to be as injured as he claims. Tisheng points out that the truth is now clear. Not only did the protagonist show no remorse for his detestable actions, but he also manipulated Huan Zhao in an attempt to escape his punishment, so they must punish him according to the clan rules in order to serve as a warning to others. Huan Zhao insists and tells her mother that she really did strike him 8 times with the whip. Suddenly, other servants arrive, informing the madam that a woman is causing a huge commotion outside, that she has already gathered a large crowd, and that she insists on seeing the protagonist. Tisheng asks what woman this is and which clan she comes from. The subordinate says she is from the Red Harmony Courtyard. Wanru shouts that this is shameful and orders that woman to be brought into the ancestral hall immediately. Shuier, who had planned all of this, smiles because she did not expect the protagonist to actually survive such serious injuries, but fortunately she came prepared. A woman runs in, sees the protagonist, and thinks that he is her target. She runs over and throws herself onto him, saying that he is a heartless man and that, after using her however he wanted, he said he had no money and could not pay, but promised to take her home as his concubine. He had even said that she could become sisters with the young misses of the clan. So that was the only reason she agreed to him, and how could he abandon her like this? Xuan asks that woman to behave for a moment. Wanru grows more and more irritated by the whole situation, saying that the protagonist is a filthy scoundrel and asks what he has to say in his defense. He asks her to wait just a moment because he will explain everything. He looks at the girl and asks what her name is. The girl, acting very well, points out that the protagonist passionately called her Spring Blossom so many times, but now he is pretending to have forgotten. Zuan plays along and asks for forgiveness, calling the girl Sweet Spring Blossom, saying he has been busy recently and asks how much he owes her for her services. The girl asks how he can use the word services and whether that is meant to insult the feelings he paid for. She begins counting, saying they were together for almost half a month, which comes to a total of 30 silver taels. Zuan asks if he really slept with such a cheap prostitute, and apparently he must have been very desperate. The two brothers start laughing, saying they have to admit that young people these days have good taste. Zuan continues saying that this is far too cheap and offers to give her 300 silver taels. That way she can consider the extra as a betrothal gift. The girl is impressed and asks if the protagonist is serious. Wanru was almost losing patience with all of this, but the Duke asks her to wait a little longer. Zuan looks at his wife and calls her darling, saying he has no money on him, and asks if she could lend him 300 silver taels. She says it is fine and asks her maid to bring the 300 silver taels immediately. Shuer is surprised by this reaction and wonders what exactly is going on there. Once the money is delivered, the protagonist breathes a sigh of relief, saying that Blossom arrived just in time, because that silver should cover the moving expenses. After all, the last woman he brought home was sent to the military camp, but she could not endure it, so Spring Blossom will have to take her place. The girl asks what he means by moving expenses and military camp. The protagonist laughs, asking if she does not know, and explains that unfortunately his wife is perfect in almost every way. Her only flaw is that she idolizes him too much and gets a little jealous when he does this kind of thing. The last time he brought a woman like her home, his wife made up a story to send her to the military camp to entertain the soldiers. It is a little embarrassing to act like a good bride every night, so he feels very bad for her. Chuyan realizes what needs to be done and asks the guards to take that woman to the military camp. But even so, she becomes very irritated. And because of that, the protagonist obtains 245 rage points. The guards begin taking the girl outside, and she screams that she does not want to go to the military camp and admits that everything she just said was a lie because she does not even know that man. The protagonist tells her not to worry because they are members of the private army, so they will take very good care of her. The only problem is that they are eager for fresh meat. As she is dragged outside, she screams Diao Yang's name, saying the situation is completely different from what he told her, and tells him to say something, because she does not want to go to a military camp. She keeps saying that he was the one who asked her to do this. Diao Yang slaps her across the face, telling her not to try to slander him, and curses her as a madwoman because the clan's forces have strict moral standards, so how could he possibly do something like that? But as soon as the Duke hears this, he approaches furiously, asking if he really ordered that woman to do this. The girl falls to her knees on the floor and explains to the Duke that Diao Yang gave her 20 silver taels and said she would earn much more after the job was completed. And since this is a Duke's estate and is filled with nobles everywhere, she was sure she could earn enough for a lifetime if she helped him. So she did all of that and begs the Duke to forgive her. Diao Yang kneels in front of the Duke as well, also begging for forgiveness, and points out that he was instructed to do this. The Duke asks who ordered him. Shuer, who was standing behind them, simply looks at Diao Yang, and he remembers what had happened, then shouts that he does not know because he could not see clearly at the time. He explains that person spoke to him from the other side of a wall and bribed him to do this. Besides, he had always hated the fact that the young miss married someone as useless as the protagonist, so like an idiot he agreed. But now he knows the mistake he made and asks for mercy because of his many years of service. The Duke says the situation is now very clear and that the protagonist was probably falsely accused, so considering that he has already been punished, the matter is over, and no one will speak about it again in the future. This is an order and is not up for debate. Wanru asks if Swan is really going to walk away freely without any kind of punishment. The Duke says no because the protagonist was involved in all kinds of bad matters, therefore, to ensure that he does not cause more trouble in the future, he will be sent to Bright Moon Academy to cultivate. Wanru agrees, saying that this way he can become a learned man. That way he can at least help the clan as an accountant or something like that in the future. Sometime later, back in his room, the protagonist is curious about what kind of academy Bright Moon Academy is. But he decides to put that aside for now, since it is time to play the lottery again. He did not expect to obtain 1,646 rage points all at once. Huan Zhao enters his room cheerfully and calls him by name. The protagonist asks her to call him brother-in-law, but she says no and teases him. He asks why she is there. Huan Zhao, a little embarrassed, explains that she is there to apologize. The protagonist is a little confused and asks why. She points out that because of the bet the two of them made, she agreed to forget everything that happened that night. However, she was unable to protect him, since he even ended up being punished because of it. The protagonist says that does not matter much since she is just a child, so it is normal that her words do not carry much weight in the family and now she can leave. She becomes a little angry about this, and he gains 66 rage points. She thinks that she is not a child, so she does not like being called that. However, before leaving, she points out that in the future she will protect him when he is at the academy. If anyone tries to bully him, he only needs to say that he is under her protection. A short while later, he sneezes while holding a bottle of poison. That is a throwing weapon. All targets hit by that item within a small area will feel a weak, paralyzing effect. It ignores all defenses of targets below the 5th stage. Suddenly, a boy runs over to him, calling him young master, and hands him a coat, saying that he will catch a cold, so he needs to stay warm. Xuan is surprised and asks who exactly he is. The boy calls him young master again, asking if Xuan is joking with him, and explains that he is his study companion servant. Xuan becomes so happy that he asks what the servant called him earlier. The young man says it was young master, and the protagonist says he still cannot hear him and asks him to say it louder. He starts running around Xuan, calling him young master several times. Xuan tells the boy that he was not bad at all and that apparently he has a bright future ahead, then asks what his name is. The boy says his name is Cheng Shuping. He points out that the master himself gave him that name and says the protagonist always flatters him because he was deeply favored by the master while working for him, but one day he was transferred to the kitchen. He was a little afraid that he had unintentionally offended the old master somehow, but now that he has been assigned as the study companion of a new young master, the protagonist asks him to stop talking because he is talking too much, and asks if Shuping knows why the Chu clan chose him as their son-in-law. Shuping says yes and points out that it was because the first young miss thought the protagonist was very handsome. Xuan thinks that if his own wife chose him, then he can eliminate the possibility that she is the mastermind behind the assassination attempts because of the arranged marriage. But that girl is not blind, and maybe she fell in love with the protagonist's beauty and now wants to taste his body. He decides to ask Shuping if he knows Suer. His new servant asks who does not know that girl because she is the first young miss's personal maid. Not only is she beautiful, but she also has a sweet voice. Countless people in the mansion consider her their dream lover, so he would like to ask for a favor, and if his new young master does not mind, he would like him to try to bring them together. Xuan says Shuping is talking nonsense again, and explains that he is asking if his servant has any information about her, for example, whether she has worked in the mansion since she was young. Shuping says no, because she was rescued and brought to the mansion 3 or 4 years ago. Xuan takes the opportunity and asks if he knows anything about cultivators in the Master Realm, and how many masters of that kind exist in Bright Moon City. Shuping says he knows, however, that city does not have any, and putting Bright Moon City aside, he doubts there are any masters in all of Linchuan County. This surprises the protagonist, and he asks once again if there really are none in the entire county. Shuping explains that, in the Zhou dynasty, only the 3 dukes, the Grand Marshal, the Swiftsteed General, and a few kings are masters. There are very few masters like them, so how could there be any in Bright Moon City? The protagonist says that is enough, and asks if there is any good doctor in Bright Moon City or anyone famous. Shuping says that Divine Physician Ji is the most skilled doctor in all of Bright Moon City, and to be more precise, he is the most skilled doctor in the entire county, and there is no illness he cannot treat. This makes the protagonist excited, and he runs out asking his servant to take him to that doctor. Shuping asks the young master to wait a moment and explains that the Divine Physician charges 100 silver taels as a consultation fee. Xuan is no longer quite so happy, but his servant says he can do something else, and the protagonist becomes interested, asking what it is. As soon as they arrive in front of the clinic, the protagonist asks why there are so many people gathered there, and whether that city really has that many rich people. Shuping explains that most of those people are not there to see Divine Physician Ji. Some people start asking where Miss Ji is, and this makes Xuan curious, asking if the Divine Physician is a woman. Shuping says no, because the Divine Physician is actually Miss Ji's father. The young miss is not only a stunning beauty, but she's also known for being a warm and kind person. She usually offers free consultations to nobles, which makes her incredibly popular in the city. Those people are probably there to visit her. The protagonist asks how many beautiful women that guy has seen in his life, since maybe he has been single for so long that even a female gorilla would be a beauty in his eyes. But suddenly the people start shouting that she is coming, and he asks why they are so noisy. The protagonist is shocked and asks why. She shouts that they are making too much noise. However, everyone is surprised because they thought it was the young miss. But it was actually Divine Physician Ji who appeared, although he looked a little different from usual. He realizes that everyone is frozen until he looks down and thinks that he stole that thing yesterday and forgot he was wearing it because it was very comfortable. He goes back inside, dying of embarrassment, and a short while later returns in his normal clothes. One of the people asks him where his daughter is. Ji asks who he is. The man introduces himself, saying his name is Wang Fugi, and that he often comes to that house. Fugi realizes that the divine physician cannot remember him because apparently he can only remember the faces of beautiful ladies and very rich guys. After giving him a good look, the doctor tells his client that he probably never spent a single coin there. Fugi explains that this is not true because he never had a consultation with the doctor, but rather with his daughter, since she is always the one who treats him. G becomes furious because he had been wondering why his business had been losing money recently, so it is because of that money-losing girl who has been treating all of them for free. However, the people say they are there for the young miss, not him. The doctor explains that she is not present because he sent her outside the city to gather herbs so she would stop interfering with his business. So, those who want to be treated must either pay the fee of 100 silver taels or complete one of his tasks. The protagonist is impressed to see that even her own father called his daughter a money loser. Fugi tries to tell the doctor that they cannot afford 100 silver taels and asks him to have mercy. People begin leaving, saying it is a waste of time, because he will not do the same thing his daughter always did. G tells Fugi that he is suffering from poverty and that this disease is beyond his abilities. Fugi starts leaving, saying that the doctor has none of the virtues a doctor should have, so how can he be called a divine physician? But one young man has a secret weapon. He takes out a magazine called Paradise on Earth and shows it to the doctor, saying he obtained it recently and that it is the newest edition of Paradise on Earth. G gets excited, saying that this is not bad at all and takes the magazine, telling the man that he may enter, because he will be treated later. The young man thanks the doctor for all of this. Zuan is surprised to see that this kind of thing also works, and it is a pity he does not know how to draw, otherwise he would have given the doctor some masterpieces from Earth. But he does not know exactly whether those magazines would work and, irritated, asks why that guy is allowed to enter. The doctor says that is none of the protagonist's business, and that if he wants to enter as well, he just needs to pay the consultation fee. Or if he has no money, he can complete one of the tasks on the list. He shows a written paper saying that today's task from the divine physician is a key refining pill, but for that he needs 10 gubaos from ass-ripping wolves for his medicine. The people ask if the doctor is deliberately making things difficult for them. The doctor asks if they think he is some kind of idiot because why would he bother handing out tasks if they were easy? Zuan tells his servant that the doctor is acting with extreme arrogance and asks if he really is not afraid of being beaten by someone. Shuping gets scared and asks the protagonist to lower his voice. He explains that in recent years, many people have tried to force him to treat them. However, what happened to all those people is that they are now resting in their graves. Besides, the protagonist has no idea how many experts owe him favors. Even the city lord needs to be polite in his presence. Still indignant, Zuan asks if that guy is really that ruthless, and also asks if there is no way to complete that task. Shuping says there are some ways to complete the task, but every ass-ripping wolf is at least in the second stage, and the pack leader might very well be in the third stage. Besides, gubaos are incredibly rare. It would be a stroke of luck to find even 1 in 10 wolves. But the worst part is that the wolves always move in packs of dozens or hundreds. Shuping asks his young master if he knows why the ass-ripping wolf has that name. He points out that it is because they are skilled at driving their sharp fangs into the target's butt before the target even realizes it. They have already sent many people to heaven. Shuping becomes thoughtful and asks him not to do it. Zuan says it is fine, because he already understands everything. However, he asks his servant to leave first because he wants to walk around the city alone. However, he needs to remember not to tell anyone that the protagonist was there. Shuping runs back and asks his young master not to worry, asking if he forgot the meaning of his name because his mouth is a tomb. But the protagonist thinks that guy is not 100% reliable. The doctor is enjoying his new magazine and looks at the protagonist. Zuan asks if he really is capable of curing every disease. G explains that except for poverty, there is no disease in that world that he cannot cure. Zuan asks what will happen if he completes the task the doctor proposed and the doctor is unable to cure his disease. G asks if it is not just a tiny little thing in the protagonist's crotch, because he talks about it as if it were a terminal illness. The protagonist becomes a little embarrassed and asks him to speak a little lower. Some people nearby start laughing, saying he is impotent at such a young age because young people these days are getting weaker and weaker. The girl asks if it is a sexually transmitted disease, and whether she might also get infected by standing near him. Zuan, dying of embarrassment, tells the doctor that he will accept the task and asks where he can find the wolves. The doctor laughs, saying there is a place called Wolf Valley outside the city, but he is too weak and will only be offering his backside for those wolves to do whatever they want. The doctor throws a potion to the protagonist, telling him to take that recovery medicine because it may save his life. Since Wolf Valley is very dangerous, he needs to run away if things do not go as planned. Zuan thinks that despite his sharp tongue, the divine physician is very kind on the inside, so he truly deserves his title. But the truth is that the doctor believed the protagonist had stained his daughter's reputation, so that bottle would give him a false sense of security and encourage the protagonist to venture even deeper into Wolf Valley. That way, he would be dead before he even knew what hit him. As he was walking, the protagonist saw some things swaying. He's impressed, asking if those ears and tails are real, because he thought it was only a costume and had no idea they were actually real. So, apparently humans and other races coexist in that world, and that is far too incredible. But he quickly becomes upset again, thinking that he cannot even make that thing stand up. So what is the point of fantasizing about these things? Suddenly, a guy touches the protagonist's shoulder and asks where he is going. He asks what happened and whether the protagonist does not recognize him. He introduces himself, saying he is Plum Blossom 12, and that they drank alcohol and played dice together. He is the same man who had tried to eliminate the protagonist the first time. Zuan says he remembers him now and points out that he is going to Wolf Valley. Plum Blossom smiles, saying that this is a great coincidence because he is also going there, and suggests that the two go together. But the truth is that he was thinking that he failed his mission once and was even severely punished by his master. He did not expect the protagonist to survive after being struck by lightning, but this time he can throw him into a wolf pack and no one will find out. Besides, the clan will never be able to trace it back to him. But the protagonist is already aware of all this. He looks at that guy and thinks that through him, he will discover who is really trying to kill him. Zuan tries to make conversation, asking what Plum Blossom's current cultivation level is, since those other soldiers seem to respect him a lot. Plum Blossom says he is still at the third step of the second stage and asks the protagonist why he is curious about his motive. He calls the protagonist closer and holds him, saying the two of them need to walk side by side because only then will he be able to protect him. Plum Blossom thinks that this time he absolutely cannot leave him alive. The protagonist keeps playing along and says it is great to have an older brother personally protecting him, because he is already at the third step of the second stage and must be the strongest among his brothers. But the protagonist thinks that, apparently, he does not seem to be that strong since he managed to obtain the same strength in just one day, and that idiot only has that much, yet still dares to mess with him. Plum Blossom explains that it is not quite like that because some of his brothers are as strong as him, but the strongest among them is his 13th brother. The protagonist points out that if all of them are that strong, then the boss behind them must be an incredible figure. Plum Blossom almost lets it slip, but tells the protagonist to forget it since he knows nothing about cultivation. So what is the point of them talking so much about that thing? Someone was behind a tree watching the two of them. Suddenly, Plum Blossom appears behind Tan, asking why he is in such a hurry. Tan is surprised and asks Plum Blossom if he is there to capture him. Plum Blossom starts laughing, asking how Tan can say that since he saved his life last time. Tan is surprised to see that Plum Blossom still remembers that. Plum Blossom asks how he could possibly forget such a selfless act. In any case, it is only a misunderstanding between the gang boss and Tan. As long as he can clarify things, Tan has nothing to fear, so why is he running away? But Tan asks how that could be a misunderstanding, since the boss took his woman by force and forced her to do that. Plum Blossom points out that he does not feel entitled to speak about the grudge between the two of them, but personally he feels sorry for Tan. However, a real man like Tan will never lack women, and there is no need to hold a grudge over that. Tan points out that all the brothers have been hunting him over the past few days, but Plum Blossom is the only one who still cares about him. The protagonist had heard this conversation and is impressed to discover that the boss of that gang took that man's wife by force, which means he really is very strong. Tan asks if Plum Blossom could do him a favor, and points out that he has no money and cannot return to the city because the silver tails he saved over the years are hidden inside the wall of his house, behind the 9th brick of the 6th row in his courtyard. So, if Plum Blossom can get them, half will be his. Plum Blossom says there is no problem and tells Tan not to say he will give him half, because even if he did not gain anything, he would still help him. However, he points out that unfortunately he is a little busy at the moment, so Tan will have to wait because he is accompanying that brother to Wolf Valley. Tan tells him not to worry about that because they can help. The protagonist starts questioning why he needs to suffer for the sake of that brotherhood. As soon as the guy grabs the knife, he becomes frightened, crying and not knowing what to do now, because if he reveals his cultivation, everything will be ruined. But Plum Blossom betrays Tan and stabs him in the body, saying that not only will he be rewarded by the gang boss, but he will also keep all the silver tails. So why should he bother helping him? Tan, in the final moments of his life, tells his old brother that he will not have a peaceful death. Plum Blossom says he does not need to be afraid because that guy was just a traitor to the gang, so he deserved to die. Still worried, the protagonist thinks that the last person this guy called brother is currently lying on the ground, cut down like a corpse. Plum Blossom asks why the protagonist is going to Wolf Valley. Xuan explains that today's task from the divine physician is to collect gubaos, so he is going there in the hope of getting lucky. Plum Blossom reveals what he truly wanted to do and starts laughing, asking if he is alone and saying that apparently he did not become any smarter after surviving the lightning strike. In fact, the opposite happened. He became even more stupid, to the point of falling straight into his trap right after that. Xuan realizes that he referred to the trap as if it were the second time. The protagonist starts screaming, throws himself onto the ground, and rolls around. Plum Blossom says this is too weak and that it is no wonder people are calling him a loser. Xuan asks his great brother what he is talking about, but Plum Blossom only kicks him and tells him to shut up, because he is nothing but a piece of trash, and no one there is his great brother. The last time he tied the protagonist to a tree, he did not die, so Plum Blossom was reprimanded by the gang boss. But now he would like to see if the protagonist will be that lucky again. Xuan thinks there is something even bigger behind all of this. He keeps playing along, asking if Plum Blossom was the culprit and points out that he never did anything to offend him. So why is he doing all of this? But Plum Blossom says the protagonist should blame himself for offending someone he should not have offended. Xuan becomes irritated since he still has not managed to understand or discover who is trying to kill him. He tries once more, asking who he offended to deserve this. Plum Blossom thrusts his sword beside the protagonist, saying he does not need to know about that since he can ask King Yama directly when he reaches the underworld. But if the protagonist answers a few questions, then he can consider giving him a quick and painless death. Xuan asks what he wants to know. Plum Blossom asks what the young Miss Chuyan's body is like. That was the last straw. The protagonist asks if he is really talking about his wife. Plum Blossom says that if the protagonist does not want to talk about her, then that is fine, he can play with him a little. Xuan takes out his dagger and strikes Plum Blossom, who begins to feel extreme pain and is shocked to see that the protagonist is actually a cultivator. Xuan drags Plum Blossom to the edge of the cliff, which was full of monsters below. A short while later, Plum Blossom begins to open his eyes, and the protagonist, with a smile on his face, asks if he is all right. Plum Blossom gets irritated, saying he is Plum Blossom 12 and asking how the protagonist dares to humiliate him like this. Because of that, the protagonist gains 77 rage points. He points his short sword at Plum Blossom and orders him to say now who hired him to eliminate the protagonist. Plum Blossom explains that this was a direct order from the gang boss, but the protagonist gets irritated and says he wants a name and the reason why he wants to eliminate him. Plum Blossom says the boss's name is Mei Chao Feng. The protagonist asks who that mysterious person is. Plum Blossom tries to explain, saying he does not know who that person is, because they were dressed in a black cloak from head to toe, along with a black bamboo hat that hid their face. Because of that, he cannot even tell if they are a woman or a man. Xuan thinks that besides Shuer, there are now other people who want to kill him. However, he still does not know why so many people want to see him dead. Plum Blossom manages to break free and shouts, attacking the protagonist, but he dodges and throws a stone at Plum Blossom's face, pushing him off the cliff. Plum Blossom, surrounded by monsters, screams that his master, the 13th brother, will avenge his death. Xuan explains that he should not worry about that because he will obviously settle his problems with them in the future as well, but right now, Plum Blossom is between darkness and light. A short while later, the protagonist was playing the lottery again, but he was not very happy with the result because he had already spent 4,000 rage points just to win 5 marrow cleansing pills, and now he only had 3,020 points left. If he had suspected this could happen, then perhaps it would have been better to leave that guy alive for a little longer. The system appears saying that since the user has obtained enough marrow cleansing pills to raise his cultivation talent to the maximum level, this item can no longer be part of the reward list. She shows a screen saying that the marrow cleansing pill is a great alternative for improving his cultivation talent, and the price per unit is 10,000 rage points. She continues explaining that the shop function is now unlocked. The user can buy more marrow cleansing pills from the shop if he wishes. Its starting price is 10,000 rage points, and the protagonist is surprised to see that this is very expensive. He asks if there is any other use for those things, for example, improving strength, luck, or something like that, but the system says she does not know. He holds all the pills, asking what happens if he eats all of them together, and whether the effect might be doubled. The system says maybe, and the protagonist, without thinking twice, eats all of them. After eating them, he says he does not know how much black slime will come out of his body, so it is better to get into the water. As he is heading into the river, he feels something happening inside his body, as if every cell is changing. The system starts laughing, and the protagonist gets angry, asking how that stinky little brat dared to trick him. He almost loses consciousness because of it and ends up sinking. Not far from there, a woman was bathing in the water and hears the protagonist hitting his head against a rock. She gets startled and turns around, asking who is there. Zuan complains about the pain in his head, but the girl, embarrassed, tries to hide under the water, asking who he is. The protagonist thinks she is a very beautiful woman. Besides, that place seems very good for taking a relaxing bath. Embarrassed, he tries to explain, saying he was passing through while collecting herbs, and when he was attacked by a beast, he ended up falling into the river and losing consciousness, so he woke up there. He points out that he was not there to spy on her. It is just that he never thought he would find a girl bathing in that lake. The girl, also a little embarrassed, says this is a huge coincidence, because she was also collecting herbs. Besides, she needs to put her clothes back on and asks the protagonist to close his eyes. He thinks she is very shy, but ends up looking the other way, asking her to get dressed quickly. But he cannot miss this opportunity, so he should get a little closer. But as soon as he starts getting out of the water, he realizes that his nose is bleeding and thinks this might be the effect of the pill on his body. Suddenly, the girl comes running desperately, telling the protagonist to run. He's confused, asking what is happening, but she simply grabs his arm and starts pulling him. A crazed rhinoceros with red eyes appears. This is a beast in the 4th stage. It has weak senses and a terrible temper, which results in the habit of attacking any living being that appears in front of it. She explains that the rhinoceros was chasing her before, and the protagonist asks why she brought that thing to him. She apologizes for doing that, but asks him not to be afraid because everything will be fine. But Zuan is actually very calm and even a little happy about the situation. They keep running, and she says this should end soon and dodges a rock, but the rhinoceros destroys the rock with ease, and the protagonist asks when this soon will be. She starts a countdown, and as soon as she reaches one, the rhinoceros simply becomes dizzy and falls to the ground. She points out that it worked. The protagonist is impressed, asking how she managed to do that. The girl explains that she put a little sedative on that boulder, and the rhinoceros must have inhaled some when it crashed into it. Zuan asks what kind of medicine is so powerful that it can knock out a huge rhinoceros in a matter of seconds. This makes him suspect that she could be The girl interrupts him with a smile on her face and explains that this is a protection method her father created against perverts. The protagonist asks who her father is, and she says her father is named Ji Dungtu. After hearing this, the protagonist thinks she must be talking about the divine physician, and now everything makes sense. He tries to ask if she really is, but embarrassed, she covers certain parts of her body and asks the protagonist to stop looking at her and turn around. He apologizes and asks her to get dressed quickly. He tries to take a small peek, but she shouts, telling him not to look. The protagonist says it is fine and turns his back to her. A short while later, she pulls him, saying she is done now and they can talk. She asks why someone without cultivation is in that place collecting herbs. The protagonist says he will explain the whole truth and begins telling her that he is there to go after the ass-ripping wolves. The girl points out that the wolves are beasts that, although they are not very strong, usually move in packs and are very vengeful. If the protagonist is not careful, his butt will be ripped apart since he's only an ordinary person. This lands like a real blow on the protagonist, and he thinks she does not need to keep touching those wounds. The protagonist looks at the rhinoceros, saying that if he tries to face them head-on, it really will be an impossible task. But if he wants to collect their gubaos, he can only think of one strategy that is not very sensible. But suddenly, he has a great idea. He asks if she has a handkerchief because he would like to borrow it for a moment. As soon as the rhinoceros wakes up, the protagonist starts provoking it. The rhinoceros gets irritated and starts running after him. The protagonist runs ahead, saying that everything is going according to plan and that he only needs to maintain his maximum speed. As soon as he gets near the cliff, he grabs onto a vine, causing the rhinoceros to fall into the rift with the wolves. The rhinoceros, which is in a chaotic state and at the 4th stage, stares at the wolf pack, while the wolves feel that their territory has been invaded. However, all of them are in the 2nd stage. The pack leader says there is another invader looking for death, so they need to attack. All the wolves attack at the same time, trying to defeat that rhinoceros. The protagonist only watches, saying it is true that those wolves rip other people's butts, and that nature is merciless. Suddenly, his vine breaks and he falls to the ground. The girl goes over to him, saying that was very cruel, and asks why he did that. Zuan tells her not to worry because the rhinoceros will not die that easily and asks her to just watch. The wolves keep attacking, and the rhinoceros screams that its butt is going to end up being ripped apart. But suddenly something comes out of the rhinoceros and the wolves quickly start fainting, saying that it is poisonous. The protagonist and the girl go down and he retrieves his blade. She asks how he managed to do that, and the protagonist says it was very simple because he put poison on the dagger, and as soon as the wolves tried to attack, they ended up being wounded by it and died. However, it is a pity that her handkerchief ended up getting completely dirty, but he promises to buy her a new one once they return to the city. The girl is impressed, saying he really is amazing for being able to eliminate so many wolves that way. Embarrassed, she says she has a request to make and knows it might seem a little unreasonable, but she would still like him to hear her out. She explains that her father is preparing a certain medicine, and one of the necessary ingredients is wolf gubaos. Because of that, she would like to know if he is willing to sell some to her, and she can offer 10 or even 15 silver taels for each one. She asks what he thinks of that price because that is all the money she has. He decides to sell the items to her and she becomes very happy, thanking and praising him once again, saying that he is a very kind person for selling such valuable ingredients. The protagonist tells her that the two of them are friends now. Besides, she also helped him a lot, so she can treat it as a gift. Still happy that she managed to get them, she points out that her father will be very pleased with this. The protagonist manages to make a profit of 50 silver taels. He thinks that the shameless divine physician should not be upset about that, since the fee is 100 silver taels per consultation. But before he can leave, she touches his arm, saying that he helped her a lot, so she would like to ask him to go home with her, because her father will be able to treat him. The protagonist becomes embarrassed, wondering why that girl keeps reminding him of his problem all the time. Suddenly, he hears a noise and asks her if she heard it too, but the girl says no and asks if something is wrong. The protagonist focuses and thinks that because of the improvement in his cultivation, he can now hear sounds from far away, and that is truly incredible. He tries to figure out what that sound is and can make out what seems to be the sound of a carriage and swords clashing. He grabs her by the arm, saying that the noise is getting closer to them, so they need to leave immediately, but the girl, still confused because she cannot hear anything, asks what is really happening there. Meanwhile, in the carriage, they were trying to move as quickly as possible because the others were catching up to them. But one guy manages to catch up and tries to attack, asking if they really thought they could escape from this. With just one attack, he sends 3 of his opponents flying. The man and his henchmen say that the former #1 beauty will live a little longer and have some fun with them. One of the guards shouts for the man not to be rude to Madame Yu, otherwise the Yu clan will destroy Black Wind Stockade. The protagonist says that name could not be any worse, but in the end, bandits are bandits and nothing more. The girl explains that the leader is not among them, because the leader of those bandits is the great bandit Chen Xuan, and he is a cultivator in the 6th stage, probably already reaching the 7th stage, while his henchmen are all below the 5th stage. But suddenly the 3rd master manages to find the poor girl, saying there is a woman hiding there and that she is very beautiful. The henchmen say they are very lucky now because they were afraid one young lady would not be enough, but now they have another one. The 3rd master says that now he will examine the goods one by one, starting with that girl and then moving on to Madame Yu. The poor girl screams for the 3rd master not to touch her. The protagonist becomes irritated and selects the bottle of poison from his system. The 3rd master notices that the protagonist is approaching and cuts the bottle he threw, asking who that brat is and how he could attack the 3rd master with only a bottle. However, the bottle begins to release poison, and the 3 of them quickly fall to the ground, saying they cannot move. Tied up and lying on the ground, the 3rd master shouts at the protagonist, asking how he can humiliate the 3rd master, and says that because of this, he will be cut into pieces. But Xuan steps on the 3rd master's face, asking if he really is capable of doing that, then asks why he is waiting so long and tells him to try cutting him. The henchmen start cursing the protagonist, saying that apparently he really does not want to live anymore for daring to touch the 3rd master. Because of that, his rage points keep rising. He laughs and tells the bandits that the angrier they get, the happier he becomes, because he loves it when his opponents hate him. And apparently, they have someone there who cannot do anything. He keeps kicking and hitting the 3 of them, thinking that he wasted a bottle of poison, so they need to give him rage points to make up for it. The people from the Yu clan are impressed by this, and one of the men walks over to the protagonist, thanking him for his help. Xuan says that now that he saved their lives and also Madame Yu's life, what are they going to do to reward him? The young man says that is not exactly what they meant, because they do not know what the hero wants in return. But the young man thinks this is the first time he has seen someone ask for money so shamelessly. The protagonist walks past the guards, saying the 2 of them are not that familiar with each other, so there is no need to speak that way. Besides, he is only a guard, so he would not have enough money to pay the reward, which is why the protagonist needs to see the hostess, who has the final say. The guard asks him not to be so rude, but the protagonist opens the carriage curtain, and Madame Yu says the protagonist is very direct with his words and is not hypocritical like those bandits. But as soon as he sees the woman inside, he is impressed by her beauty. Madame Yu points out that, as compensation for saving her life, she is willing to offer 10,000 gold coins and asks if that amount is enough to satisfy him. The protagonist says the gold is necessary, but he would also like to have the lady, then asks if she would be willing to accompany him on a walk through the forest so they can talk a little about love and spend some time alone. Madame Yu ends up accepting the invitation, and while the 2 of them are walking, she says that the protagonist insisted on taking her to such a remote place for a walk in the forest, so perhaps he wants to say something to her. Xuan looks at her and says he noticed she's a little impulsive when she asks a question. Yu asks him to stop joking around. The protagonist says that, for her sake, he will give her a piece of advice and points out that there is a traitor among her guards, because the bandits knew who was inside the carriage. That shows she was the target from the beginning. He asks if she does not think it is too much of a coincidence for an ambush to happen in a place like that, precisely when she was with her weakest guards. Madame Yu becomes a little shocked, asking how that is possible. She takes out a cane, saying that it is the Jade token, one of her belongings. So, if he needs her help in the future, he only has to show it to the men of the Yu clan. So, if he truly needs her help, he does not need to avoid coming to her. Before accepting it, Xuan asks if that will be deducted from the 10,000 she said she would give him. She says no. The protagonist accepts it and tells her that he has a great idea to escape that situation, because all they need to do is say that the bandits will be tortured to death until they confess what really happened, and whoever wants to eliminate her will be the traitor. Madame Yu agrees, saying that if someone is working with those bandits, that person certainly will not want them to expose them. She thanks the protagonist once again for the excellent plan. Xuan starts leaving, saying that the good deed he did should not be revealed, so she cannot tell anyone that it was his idea. Besides, he would also like to thank her very much for the gift and will visit her when he has free time. Madame Yu is surprised, thinking that this young master is not as simple as he seems, because his face does not reveal his actions, which means he is unpredictable. Miss G asks the protagonist what he said to Madame Yu, but he only asks her to return to Bright Moon City for the night and find a small place like an inn to rest. She thinks she does not quite understand, but ends up agreeing. A few hours later, in Bright Moon City, everyone is happy to see that the young miss has returned. She asks everyone to calm down and form a line. Besides, she asks the protagonist to go ahead and find her father. Xuan thinks Xiaoxi is a good girl. She cares a lot about people's well-being and is a true bodhisattva, because that is what a doctor should be like, not forgetting to help others with her skills. A short while later, the protagonist is a little vulnerable and tells the divine physician that he has already paid the consultation fee, so he asks him to do something already and not just stand there. And since he accepted the payment of 100 silver taels, he should at least be a little more professional. The doctor looks at the payment and thinks that the money he gave his daughter looks very similar to that. However, she had said she bought a rare treasure and spent 150 silver taels on it, so maybe he is overthinking it. The doctor looks at the protagonist's private parts and says that this little thing looks very fragile, which means he was probably struck by the yin-yang pulse severing palm. However, he should not worry because the method to break the seal is very simple. The protagonist asks the doctor to wait and asks if he is going to say that he needs to cultivate until he reaches the master realm. The divine physician is surprised, saying that he knows how to solve his problem and still came there, asking if he enjoys throwing money away. Xuan tells the doctor to give his money back because he would not have come for a consultation if he could reach the master realm so easily. Besides, he would need to cultivate for hundreds of years to reach that realm. However, he does not know what the point would be in breaking the seal after so much time. The doctor says that if the protagonist is in such a hurry, there are some alternative methods that could help him. However, he warns him right now that it will not be easy at all and asks the protagonist to follow him. Xuan asks what those other methods are because no matter how difficult they are, he will accept anything that can help him. The protagonist thinks that apparently he ended up judging the book by its cover, wondering how such a bad person could have such an innocent daughter. The doctor prepares to open a cabinet, saying that while the protagonist is there, he needs to keep his eyes wide open, and reveals that this is his favorite collection. The red underwear belongs to Miss Zhang. The pink one belongs to Miss Wang. The protagonist says he does not really know what to think in his current condition and asks the doctor if he really believes that just looking at those clothes will make his little brother stand up again. The doctor says that this is his hobby because he likes collecting all kinds of underwear from beautiful women. So he can help the protagonist if he brings him a piece of Qin Wanru's clothing. The protagonist falls to the floor, asking if the doctor has even the slightest bit of respect because he already paid the 100 silver taels consultation fee. The divine physician says that the 100 silver taels were the consultation fee, but the treatment fee is a separate amount. Besides, he knows the protagonist has no more money, and that is exactly why he is granting him special treatment and a disguised discount. If he were in the protagonist's place, he would accept it instead of complaining. Xuan tells the doctor that he should act a little more like a physician, because how does he have the nerve to call himself a divine physician while acting like that? A fetish for underwear means he is a huge pervert. Besides, Wanru is his mother-in-law, so how could he possibly do such a thing? Shuping appears running, calling his young master and asking where he was because he was getting very worried. The protagonist asks what the problem is, but his servant throws the clothes at him, saying that this is something extremely important, and asking if he has forgotten that today is the back-to-school day at Bright Moon Academy. Besides, he must not be late and needs to put on the uniform immediately and follow him. A short while later, they arrive at the academy. Shuping breathes a sigh of relief, saying that fortunately he managed to bring the protagonist on time, because if he had failed, he would have been punished to death by the master. Xuan looks at the academy and is impressed, because he did not expect that private academy of the Chu clan to be so luxurious. Shuping begins explaining that Bright Moon Academy is an educational institution directly subordinate to the Minister of Ceremonies, the leader of the 9 ministers. It is an institution created for the purpose of nurturing talented individuals for future service in the imperial court. Because of that, it is not a private academy of the Chu clan. But while he was giving that explanation, the protagonist had disappeared. Xuan was hiding, saying that he spent 20 years studying, from kindergarten to university, so he never wants to go back to school again. After gathering rage points for 2 days, he finally found a quiet place to play the lottery. He goes to a small house in the middle of the lake and starts playing, but the system says he has already spent 22,200 rage points and now only has 69 points left. The protagonist is not very happy, saying that after spending more than 22,000 rage points, he only managed to get 16 key fruits. However, he does not know what that fruit is used for. The system explains that the fruit increases the cultivator's key capacity. The protagonist decides to eat it, saying that in common language, this means it will not be a waste to eat it, and only this way will he know whether it is effective or not. As soon as he eats it, he begins to focus on cultivating the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra. A short while later, he thinks that 6 formations have filled up, and that for now, this is enough. After his cultivation, he looks at his body and thinks that it was not bad at all, because he feels his Kai reserves increasing quite a lot. He begins to hear a melody and wonders if someone is nearby. However, he starts to like that song very much, saying it makes anyone feel relaxed. Since arriving in that world, he has not had even a single second of peace, so he cannot remember the last time he felt this calm. He begins walking while following the sound, thinking that he misses his home very much now that he has thought about it, and also his parents. They must have already received the news of his death. Besides, there are also those arguments on the internet forum that he used to participate in all day. How will things be without him? As soon as he reaches the place where the music is coming from, he sees a girl playing a conch. She looks at him and asks if he is still not tired of staring at her. Xuan asks how anyone could get tired of looking at such a beautiful woman, because he could stay there looking at her for several days and nights. The girl points out that he is talking a lot of nonsense because it does not even seem like he is really crying. The protagonist is surprised, asking who is crying, but tears are streaming down his face. He wipes away the tears, saying that song sounded like one he used to listen to, so he started missing his home a little. The girl asks if he really knows music. He says he knows a little, but that knowledge is useless because he cannot make money with it. So, if he is not mistaken, the two of them are both dealing with problems, which is why he would like to know if she would share some of the drink she has with him, since it is very boring to be in a bad mood alone. The girl asks if he is sure because that liquor is called Burning Heaven and is very strong. Xuan says he is sure he can handle it and asks her to give him some so he can send his problems away. The girl ends up agreeing, saying that now they have become friends. While drinking a little of the liquor, the protagonist says that maybe they are a little more than friends because by sharing that drink, they are indirectly kissing, so she should tell him her name. The girl is surprised, saying she has never met anyone as shameless as him. Suddenly, another man arrives, calling the protagonist by name and saying that he was drinking peacefully there, while he had been looking for him for quite some time. Xuan is surprised and thinks that based on that guy's clothes, he's probably also from that gang. The man says he heard a rumor going around that the Chu clan had sent him to Bright Moon Academy, and he did not believe it, but it seems it was all true. He grabs the protagonist and shows him a sheet of paper, saying that now that the two of them have met, they can talk business, because the money he owes the casino needs to be paid. But as soon as the man pats the protagonist on the back, the protagonist spits the drink on him, wondering since when he owes money to the casino. Besides, that gang tried to eliminate him 2 days ago. He tries to cover it up, saying he cannot be blamed for that because the man slapped him on the back. He complains to the girl, asking if she can really call that liquor because it is easier to drink pure alcohol. The man who came there to collect curses the protagonist, asking how he dares spit something on him, and tries to attack, ordering him to pay now, otherwise he will be cut into pieces according to the contract. The protagonist says he is not ready yet, but when the man sees the green liquor gourd, he becomes frightened because he has never seen that before. He looks at the girl and thinks that she is Shang Lu Yu. So why is the protagonist there drinking with her? Xuan realizes that the guy is scared because of that girl, and now he can solve this much faster. The protagonist pushes the man, asking where he is looking. He shouts that this girl is his sister, so how does he dare look at her that way? and whether this is happening because the man wants to offend his sister over money. Besides, he is from the Chu clan, so why would he owe money to anyone? The man is surprised, but he basically cannot do anything. He tries to control the situation, saying that the protagonist must pay his debt within 3 days because they are a small business and also have brothers to feed. Zuan says that is fine because he still has 3 days to pay. The man agrees, saying he will return in 3 days to collect the money and hands the receipt to the protagonist. As soon as the man leaves, Liu Yu tells the protagonist that they are not siblings. Zuan laughs, saying that if she does not want to be his sister, then what does she want to be? She can make her choice since he does not mind, and maybe it would be better to just say her name. That way, they would no longer keep ending up in such embarrassing situations. As soon as he looks at the receipt, he sees that the total of his debt is 1,000 taels. He is surprised, saying that this is equivalent to 18 million ween and that he will not pay it even if he dies. He thinks the previous owner of that body accumulated a lot of debt, but none of it belongs to him, so he does not need to pay it. Liu Yu says she will give him a piece of advice and asks him to pay his debts because they take the promises and contracts they make very seriously, and anyone who goes back on their word will face terrible consequences. Even the Duke would not be able to save him. The protagonist says it is very easy for her to say that and asks where he is supposed to get that much money in 3 days and whether she would lend him anything, but as soon as he looks back, he realizes she is no longer there. He gets a little upset, saying she did not need to disappear like that just because she did not want to lend him money. Ever since he was a child, he has always envied African lions, particularly the males, because their only job is to contribute their DNA, and despite being animals, they do not need to hunt. He goes to Chuyan's room, thinking that he has always believed it is fine to depend on a woman or use her money, and that is because he is also a lion. He starts searching through her things because last time, she had no problem giving him 300 taels, so she must have emergency money saved somewhere, and it would be better for him to keep some of that money with him just in case. He hears someone approaching and hides behind the wardrobe, thinking his wife came back early, but when he looks, he sees Myanmar covering her face with a mask. He realizes it is not his wife and that apparently she is richer than he imagined, but when he looks a little more carefully at that girl's body shape, he realizes it is Myanmar. He thinks he needs to be careful now because she is a close friend of his wife. However, he ends up getting distracted and makes a small noise. That is enough for Myanmar to notice someone's presence, and she attacks the wardrobe, ordering the person to come out immediately. The strike knocks the protagonist to the floor and he is surprised, asking what kind of ridiculous strength that is, because he will not be able to defend himself against it, and at this rate, he will end up dying. He asks the system to activate the heiress's ball of delight. The system says it is fine because now his life will no longer be reduced, so he can enjoy the good beating. Myanmar walks over to the protagonist asking if this is some kind of joke because he tried to defend himself from her attack despite being only a second-stage cultivator. She removes the mask to see who it is and is surprised to see that it is the protagonist. He takes advantage of this distraction and grabs her arm. He thinks the best way to deal with someone who uses long-range attacks is to fight at close range. He can finally put his skills to use after so many years of training as a keyboard warrior. He manages to move quickly behind her and starts restraining her, holding some more sensitive areas. This makes her start trembling and she asks him to stop and release her immediately. Seeing that the protagonist is not going to let her go, she shouts for him to release her again and starts releasing her power. The power is so strong that it creates a small hole in the floor. But Zuan comes out completely unharmed and laughing, asks her to try harder and scream, because the more she struggles, the more excited he becomes. However, he does not know exactly what that power is because without the heiress's ball of delight, he would have already died 1,000 times from the force of that attack. But because of it, the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra increases drastically. He keeps provoking her, asking her to hit him a little more. However, Myanmar is already completely exhausted and ends up going limp. The protagonist asks if she is already done and asks her to continue a little more. Myanmar realizes she will not be able to defeat him, starts crying, asks who he is, and asks him to let her go, but this time politely. The protagonist says there is no problem with letting her go. However, she needs to cooperate with him and do one thing. Myanmar asks what he wants. The protagonist says it is very simple and says they need to work together to get what each of them wants, then asks what she is looking for. Myanmar explains that it is an accounting book, but she still has not been able to find it. However, she wonders if he really is the guy everyone calls trash, because the protagonist is clearly in the 3rd stage. Besides, he managed to defeat her, a 5th stage cultivator. He is definitely someone she can work with. The protagonist asks what accounting book this is, but she points out that seeing his position within the clan, he clearly will not be able to help her find it anyway. Zuan asks why the two of them should work together if she has no trust in him. Myanmar touches the protagonist's shoulder, saying she believes in him and is certain he will gain a good position within the clan and discover where that book is. When that time comes, he will be able to fulfill his part of the agreement. But for now, he can tell her what he is looking for. The protagonist asks if it is not obvious what he wants, considering his current position in the clan, and points out that he wants Chuyan. Since Myanman is her best friend, he is sure she can help him a little with that. Myanman pulls her hand away and shouts at the protagonist, asking what he is thinking by touching his wife's best friend. The protagonist asks if she was not the one squeezing him first. Besides, he was only holding her hand. Myanman ends up agreeing and says that either way, she can help him win Chuyan over. But he must not forget the agreement they made, and after he gains a better position in the clan, he needs to fulfill his part. The protagonist agrees, saying that his promise is worth gold. As soon as the two reach an agreement, the protagonist leaves the room, saying that he finally managed to do it because if it had taken a little longer, maybe he would not have been able to. However, something is bothering his shoulder. When he lowers his shirt a little, he sees a mark on his shoulder, saying he knew he had felt something when his cultivation increased just now, but he does not know exactly what it is. The system appears, asking if the protagonist touched that girl's hand because he was afraid she might be able to see the mark. However, he does not need to worry about that because it is not visible to anyone else. The girl explains that this is a sign that he has advanced to the first step of the third stage, and his Phoenix Nirvana Sutra has even unlocked a new ability called Gale. The protagonist looks a little more closely at the system girl, asking if he can really unlock new abilities, and if he can also improve her, since she is part of the system, because it is very obvious that she has a lot of room for improvement. The poor system girl gets angry, asking where he was looking. The protagonist points out that she is only a hologram and has nothing to look at, so why is she reacting that way? He asks if she also does not want an improvement, but the girl says no. The protagonist thinks women are women. Even when they are only the form of the system, they still cannot give him a straight answer. He decides to change the subject and says that now he will speak a little more seriously. He points out that Gale is one of the abilities among the 9 Phoenix chicks. According to the upgrade path, there should be 8 more abilities, so he would like to know what that ability does. But the system is still angry with him, saying she does not know and that he needs to figure it out himself. The protagonist focuses and tries to use his ability, saying he has never seen a system as irresponsible as her. As soon as he examines his new ability a little more, he's surprised to see that wind element abilities are naturally joint attack abilities, and perhaps he can create a tornado or something like that. He keeps trying to understand his new ability a little better, and uses the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra with the Gale ability. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Wanru is irritated, asking who that useless protagonist thinks he is to skip the first day of school. Zhongtian tries to calm his wife down, explaining to her that there is no need to be so angry. But Wanru asks the Duke how the protagonist will be able to help his wife if he keeps acting like this. Zhongtian is surprised to see that his wife has already thought so far ahead and that, apparently, she has already accepted that boy as her son-in-law. Wanru takes a deep breath and says, how could she not accept it? Because knowing how devoted her daughter is, she has probably already decided to spend the rest of her life with that boy. And since she is a devoted mother, she can try to shape the protagonist into a true husband and a better person. Suddenly, the protagonist appears flying and falls on top of her. He apologizes for the disturbance. Wanru becomes irritated again and asks what he is doing because she was looking for him everywhere and why he did not go to the academy. The protagonist tries to explain but thinks that Gale is a teleportation ability and that this will be very useful for him in the future when he needs to escape quickly. However, he feels a great pain in his chest and thinks that the heiress's ball of delight has worn off, and he is starting to feel the effects of the beating he took from Myanmar. The Duke becomes worried about him and walks over, asking if he is alright and why he is gravely injured. The protagonist makes up a story, saying that someone actually kidnapped him and punished him severely at the academy, and he barely managed to escape because they only stopped chasing him after the guards approached. The Duke becomes irritated, asking who is causing trouble for his clan. He calls the guards and orders them to search for those shameless people immediately, because whoever did this must be severely punished. Wanru becomes worried and calls the doctors to treat the protagonist immediately. Zwan quickly improvises that story, but at least it proves that his in-laws will take care of him, because he had thought they also wanted to see him dead. A short while later, inside the protagonist's room, Zhongtian asks what medicine they gave the protagonist since he was on the verge of death, but now he seems completely fine. Wanru explains that it is a medicine made for cultivators and asks if it is possible for medicine to have a better effect on people without cultivation. The protagonist regains consciousness, calls the two of them father and mother, and asks why they are still there. Wanru asks who else, besides the two of them, would stay there to take care of him, but now that he is already feeling better, he needs to return to the academy tomorrow morning with no excuses. The protagonist ends up agreeing, She calls Hong Xingying, saying he is the eldest son of Butler Hong, a genius in cultivation, capable of reaching the third stage on his own. The protagonist needs to go to the academy with him tomorrow, and with him nearby, no one will dare to cause trouble again. The Duke points out that they need to go back now, but asks Xingying to take very good care of the protagonist. He tells the two of them not to worry because he will take very good care of the protagonist. Xuan is still confused, wondering why that guy called him Mr. Zhu, and he realizes that boy is looking at him differently. Maybe he is just mentally ill. Xingying calls the protagonist a useless piece of trash and asks why he did not just die, because if that had happened, Miss Chuyan would be free. So why did he not die? The protagonist laughs, asking why that boy was looking at him that way, but he never imagined he was just a fool in love with another man's wife. The protagonist asks how much of a fool he is to act like that. Xingying becomes even more irritated and grabs the protagonist by the shirt, calling him a piece of shit again and asking how he dares to say those things, because apparently he really believes he is the clan's son-in-law. Xuan says that boy can call him whatever he wants. After all, he is legally the husband and beloved man of the goddess he worships so much. And at the end of the day, he is just a servant getting angry. Xingying asks if he really is just a servant because they will see that after the talent assessment at the academy tomorrow, and who knows, maybe their roles might even be reversed. Although the academy accepts all students, the differences between their levels are as clear as day, so he is very eager to see the protagonist crying on his knees before him tomorrow. The protagonist is surprised to learn this, asking if the talent assessment will show cultivation levels. Xingying points out that, even without an assessment, anyone can tell that the protagonist is weak, and if he knows what is good for himself, then it is best that he stay out of his way at the academy. But the protagonist's real concern is that if he is assessed, he will no longer be able to hide his cultivation, and he already has enough problems. So, if he is exposed so quickly, he will become more than just a simple target. The next day at Bright Moon Academy, someone is explaining that students there are divided into 4 different classes: Yellow, Black, Earth, and Heaven. He asks the students to go up onto the stage when their names are called, and each person's power level will be evaluated to determine which class they will enter. Maju is the first to be called. He tells all the useless people to get out of his way because he is going to show everyone what true strength is, and they need to be careful not to wet their pants after seeing something so absurd. The protagonist tells Xingying that this guy is very arrogant, so his talent must be Jia class. But Xingying mocks this, saying there are only a few people with Jia class talent in the entire country, so he highly doubts someone as vulgar and crude as that person could be one of them. Maju has his talent evaluated, and it shows that he is upper Yi class. The people are impressed because someone with that talent is basically equivalent to a god there in Bright Moon County. Xingying says he already told him that he would not have much. The protagonist asks if he is saying the same thing as everyone else there because that reaction is a little disappointing. The evaluator congratulates Maju, saying he will enter the Heaven class, and calls Xingying to be examined next. Xingying tells the protagonist that he will show him what it means to be superior, since the protagonist always looks down on him for being the clan's son-in-law. But the moment he steps down from the stage, the protagonist will be nothing more than an ant beside him. Xingying goes up to the stage and says that this day will go down in history. Even with his humble origins, he was able to open his own path and overcome many obstacles. Now it is his time to leave his mark on the world. He asks Chuyan to watch him, because she deserves someone much better than the protagonist, and someday he will manage to win her over. Xuan asks if he really thinks he can win her over just by climbing to the top. The protagonist tells him to relax because he will never be the protagonist of this story. Xingying becomes irritated and ends up making a very large cut on his hand. The examiner says that just 1 drop of blood would have been enough and that he did not need to go that far. As soon as the drop of blood falls onto the crystal ball, it shows that his talent is upper Jia class. The examiners are impressed, saying his talent is very great and that he will probably enter the Heaven class directly, and they need to inform the principal. Xingying returns to the protagonist's side, saying he is next and that, as the clan's son-in-law, he had better not bring shame to them. Xuan says he was chosen to marry into the clan, just as the servant himself said, so it does not matter if he is rejected in the evaluation, since his duty is only to produce heirs for the clan, and that means he can touch the woman Xingying dreams about every day, so there is no shame in that. The protagonist thinks that with the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra in the system, he is certain his talent is not lower Ding class, but he does not know what will come out of it. A mediocre talent would be the worst result since he can no longer act like a clueless and inexperienced student, and he will also need to endure gossip. However, having high talent would make him a public target, so perhaps he should pretend to be sick to avoid taking the test. The examiner tells him to hurry up because there are still many people waiting. Seeing that the protagonist is not taking action, the examiner asks if he's afraid of knives and says he will help him, cutting his hand a little so the blood can drip onto the crystal sphere. But as soon as the blood touches the crystal sphere, it starts cracking almost instantly. Meanwhile, a woman asks what it matters if someone has upper Gia class talent, because he will receive the same guidance and treatment as everyone else. Rules are rules, and she has to show the students that the academy values everyone. Besides, she thinks that making this trip is a waste of time. But suddenly a huge explosion happens, and she dodges the energy, asking what that was. The crystal ball had exploded because of the amount of power the protagonist has. The people are impressed, asking what happened, and why the crystal ball exploded as soon as it came into contact with that boy's blood. The protagonist apologizes, saying it was not his fault and that apparently the crystal ball was of poor quality because he is not going to pay for another one. The examiner is frightened, thinking that this cannot be true, and that perhaps the protagonist could be the legendary Transcendent class talent. However, he refuses to believe it because the legend of Transcendent class talent is only a rumor, and no one has seen anyone with such talent in recent centuries. He says the crystal ball must have been broken, and asks if the protagonist's name is Zuan because he heard that the Duke had tested his power before, and he had basically none, only lower Ding class. The protagonist says that is right. The examiner says it is fine, then he can skip the test, enter the yellow class, and the others need to wait until another ball is placed there. Zuan steps down from the stage in relief because he did not expect that he could break the crystal ball, but luckily the teacher did not think too much about it because he would have been exposed if they had demanded that he repeat the test. But the woman from before saw all of this and says that the Chu clan's son-in-law is a very interesting man. She asks her subordinates to take him to her office immediately. She is the principal. Xingying walks over to the protagonist and says that not even the Duke can do anything about fights inside the academy, and that if he hears the protagonist say Chu Yan's name again, he will no longer hold back. The protagonist only laughs, saying that now that he has seen his results, he cannot hold back even one more second. Besides, Zuan says that Chu Yan is his wife, and that regardless of whether Xingying has better talent or not, he can talk about her as much as he wants. Suddenly, someone appears and tells the protagonist that the principal would like to see him immediately. Xingying asks why the principal is going to instruct the protagonist personally because she must have made a mistake, since he is the one with upper Gia class talent. But the man says that is not it, because the principal only wants to see the protagonist and might speak with him a little later. Zuan keeps provoking him and laughs, saying that Xingying cannot do anything, since he is just that irresistible. People question why the principal called the protagonist and point out that they cannot believe she is leaving aside a genius with upper Gia class talent like that. Besides, the protagonist has a prestigious clan supporting him. As for Xingying, he has no one, so no matter how high his talent is, he is only the son of a servant. Xingying becomes furious, tells everyone to shut up, and promises that one day the protagonist will pay for all of this, because he will obtain the clan status along with Chuyan. And since the two of them are at Bright Moon Academy, the fun has only just begun. A short while later, the subordinate takes the protagonist to the principal's office and says he may enter because she is waiting for him. As he opens the door, he wonders why the principal wants to speak with him so badly, and still does not know whether this could be a good thing or a bad thing. As soon as he enters, the principal greets him, saying her name is Zhang Luofu. He starts smiling, thinking that apparently this is something very good, but the principal gets up and kicks the protagonist in the face. He asks why she did that. Luofu points out that it is because he was looking at her in a vulgar way, and the last man who looked at her like that ended up in the hospital, but he simply shifts the focus of his gaze. This makes the principal even angrier, and she asks him to give her a good reason not to finish him off right there. Zuan says she cannot blame him for that since she was the one in his field of vision. He thinks that woman is even scarier than Myanmar, and since he is not using the heiress's ball of delight at that moment, he might end up dying. The protagonist says she needs to trust him, since the two of them are both transmigrators and should take care of each other. But the principal becomes confused and asks what he is talking about and what a transmigrator is. Zuan says she looks like an office lady and that there is no use trying to hide it from him because those clothes are not from that world. Luofu asks what he said she looks like because she found those clothes by chance in a dungeon, and since she found them interesting, asked some tailors to make more similar models. She asks if he has really seen that before, but the protagonist freezes the moment she mentions a dungeon. The protagonist thinks about the monsters, beasts, cultivators, and ordinary people. So a dungeon must probably be the world he came from, because there are still many mysteries regarding travel between worlds, and there might be a connection point somewhere. Luofu comes very close to him and says that, considering his abilities, he should forget about exploring a dungeon and focus only on his own survival. The protagonist gets frightened and asks what she is trying to do. The principal kneels beside him and holds his hand, saying she is only testing her theory. She makes a small cut on his finger and starts sucking. The protagonist becomes embarrassed, thinking she is hiding something, but he does not mind letting her do it, and maybe this is the consequence of being so handsome and irresistible. He asks her to be a little gentler, and she bites his finger a little harder, saying it is just a little blood, so why is he being so dramatic? Xuan asks why she did that and whether she is some kind of vampire, but the principal starts sensing a strong amount of energy and points out that she was right, because the crystal ball was not defective, and he really does have transcendent class talent. She points out that she cannot believe he has been acting like an idiot all these years, managing to fool even the Chu clan. The protagonist is surprised, because he did not know she was evaluating his talent and now does not know what he should do. He tries to work around the story, saying that this is not entirely true because they know about it, his wife, his in-laws, and even a few other people. Luofu says he is a huge liar because the blood essence of a person with transcendent class talent can drastically raise someone's cultivation. And judging by Chuyan's cultivation level, she assumes the two of them are husband and wife in name only. If she knew about this, then his wife would never let the protagonist leave her bed. Xuan becomes a little frightened by the way the principal talks about him as if he were only a tool. The protagonist releases more blood from his wound and creates a weapon with it, saying he has nothing to say about that matter. But she needs to remember that many people know about this little meeting, and if anything happens to him, the Duke will hunt her to the end of her life. Luofu touches his head and starts laughing, asking if he really thought she was going to kill him, because now she feels a little sorry for the Duke, since he had begged her to protect the protagonist. But in truth, the Duke is the one being kept in the dark. Xuan is surprised to discover that his father-in-law begged the principal to protect him. The principal changes the subject, saying that either way, the protagonist must not reveal this to anyone, at least not until he reaches his full potential. Otherwise, he will be digging his own grave and no one will be able to protect him. She points out that she will help him cover all of this up, because any information about his evaluation will be erased. She throws him a bag of cultivation ingredients and asks him to return to his classroom. Xuan, still unconvinced after what she had done and said about how good his blood is, calls out to her, saying he knows very well that his father-in-law asked the principal for this favor, but he needs to know if she is really doing this because his father-in-law asked or because she enjoyed it so much and ended up falling in love with him. Luofu shouts and kicks him out of the room, but the protagonist remains convinced, saying he already knew it because it is normal to feel attracted to someone as handsome as him, though he does not know why she suddenly got angry. While walking through the forest, the protagonist is happy because now that he is under the principal's protection, he can rule that academy. But suddenly he hears someone shouting for help, while another person says it would be better to hand it over already. The protagonist is surprised to see that there are villains there too. He looks to the side and sees 4 people robbing someone else. The group leader says it would have been easier if the blonde boy had handed it over from the beginning because they are all from the yellow class, so they do not need to fight among themselves. Besides, they are not robbing him because they gave him money, so he needs to remember that this was a fair trade. The blonde boy says that 1 keystone is worth 10 gold coins, and he had only given 1. Manhwa asks why that is not enough. The blonde boy says that is not exactly what he meant. The protagonist is surprised by the value of that thing, because 10 gold coins are equivalent to 180,000 yuan. Besides, his debt of 1,000 silver coins is insignificant compared to those stones. So, since they are all from the yellow class, the best among them should be a student with upper Ding class talent in the 2nd stage, and he is already in the 3rd stage, so this is nothing relevant. He approaches, telling everyone to leave that boy alone. Manhwa asks his subordinates who that guy is. One of his subordinates says he remembers that boy because he only has lower Ding class talent and is also in the yellow class. Manhwa starts laughing, saying another idiot has appeared, but the protagonist asks what they are laughing at and orders them to hand over the keystone immediately. Manhwa keeps laughing, saying he's only an idiot for thinking he can take the keystone. The blonde boy tells the protagonist that he is acting like an idiot because those guys are people he cannot afford to mess with, and tells him to leave quickly. Xuan asks why he should leave since he is not afraid of that guy. Manhwa gets angry and charges at the protagonist, but Xuan catches his punch with only 1 hand and says he already asked him to hand over the stone, then lands an elbow strike that knocks him out. The other subordinates go after the protagonist, saying he is only from the yellow class, so they do not need to be afraid, but within a few minutes, all of them had been defeated. Xuan asks Manhwa why he dragged things out so much because he should have listened and handed them over politely. Besides, he needs to remember that this is not robbery, because he is buying the keystones for 1 silver coin. Manhwa begs him not to do this, because they are collecting those stones for their boss, and if the boss finds out that the protagonist took all of them, then he will be in big trouble. Zuan asks who this boss he is talking about is. Manhwa says his boss's name is Ye Chenliang, a third-year student from the Earth class, and he is a cultivator in the third stage. The protagonist gets up asking if he really is from the Earth class. Manhwa asks what is going on and whether the protagonist is scared, because no matter how skilled the protagonist may be, he is still a first-year rookie in the yellow class, so he is not prepared. But Zuan simply kicks Manhwa, saying he talks too much when he should not. The protagonist starts leaving and calls the blonde boy to come with him, because if that Ye guy wants those spiritual stones back, he just needs to tell him to come get them from the protagonist. A short while later, the protagonist was looking at the amount of Kai stones he had obtained and laughing. Even after paying off his debt, he would still have enough left to become stronger. However, he still has one small problem. He does not know how to use those stones. As soon as class begins, he hears nothing but a bunch of nonsense, because he went there to learn something about Kai stones. But all he is hearing is a bunch of empty talk. The boy he had helped earlier asked the protagonist with shining eyes what the problem is, and whether military strategy class happens not to be his strong point. The boy points out that in the yellow class, cultivation has less importance in lessons. Zuan becomes a little uncomfortable with the boy's gaze and asks if he is trying to flirt with him, pointing out that he is straight and even married. The boy is impressed and asks how the protagonist knew. He introduces himself, saying that his name is Wei Suo, and Creepy is his middle name. The protagonist, still uncomfortable, asks what nonsense that boy is talking about, but Suo insists on trying to make friends, saying that he knows very well what is inside that bag. Besides, he points out that he cannot believe the protagonist actually managed to take Manhwa's stones, so he would like to know his secret. Zuan tries to take advantage of the situation and says he will tell him a little of his secret, but first he would like to know how to use those spiritual stones. Suo begins explaining that the first thing he needs to do is place the stone in the middle of his palm and then absorb its vitality into his body using his usual cultivation method. The teacher says class is over, and the protagonist gets up saying that it is finally time to test his new babies. But Suo grabs his arm, asking him not to leave so quickly because he still has not told him his secret for dealing with Manhwa. Zuan says it is all very simple. First, he needs to be born handsome, then take advantage of that devastating beauty to marry Chuyan and become the son-in-law. While he is walking, Manhwa appears in front of him, telling his boss that this is the boy who stole the stones. Chenliang points out that he has never heard of that boy before. Zuan says he has heard of that guy before because he is Manhwa's boss, known as Ye Chenliang, and if he did not know him, he would probably think he was in the heaven class, but he is only in the earth class, so he should not be much stronger. Chenliang becomes irritated, telling the rookie that he has never felt true strength firsthand, and he must have already heard that the best way to learn is to experience it for himself. Zuan thinks he could easily deal with that boy since the two of them are in the same stage, but he has the help of the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra. However, he still does not think it is time to reveal his true strength. Then he looks around and sees Myanmar, so he gets a great idea. He tells Chenliang that maybe he is the only one who has never felt true strength firsthand, so he can win that fight with a single sentence, and asks if he would like to make a bet. Chenliang says he does not believe it and tells the protagonist to go ahead and say whatever he wants, because when it is his turn, he will have to beg for mercy. The protagonist prepares himself, saying that he will take action now and calls for help, saying that someone there is trying to eliminate him, and that if there is any kind soul nearby, they need to help him. Myanmar hears this and remembers the agreement between the two of them. Chenliang starts laughing, asking what the protagonist was expecting, because apparently he is just a coward who wanted to ask for help the whole time, since at Bright Moon Academy, strength is everything, and it is a pity that no one will care about him. But suddenly, he is hit by an attack from weakening powder, which interferes with his vision. Right after that comes another attack from the Whip of Lamentation, and finally another attack from the black flames of the Lake Dragon. He falls unconscious to the ground and everyone around asks what happened because it all happened too quickly. However, the movements seem very familiar. As soon as they look back, they see the 7th most beautiful girl in the academy, Ji Jiaoxi, the 9th most beautiful girl in the academy, Chu Huanzhao, and also the 2nd, Pei Mianman. All of them had come to save the protagonist. Besides, they must not forget that the protagonist's fiancée is Chu Yan, the most beautiful girl in the academy. They cannot believe that he called the 3 most beautiful girls in the academy like that. They cannot understand what kind of atrocity this is, because how can someone so useless in cultivation have so many beautiful girls at his disposal, and all of them protecting him? This makes it seem as if depending on women is an art and a skill that he possesses. The 3 ask if he is all right because they went there as quickly as they could, but his beautiful little sister-in-law says he's embarrassing himself by doing this kind of thing. Zuan explains that he was being attacked by evil forces, so he needs to thank them for saving him. However, the protagonist was only trying to call Myanmar and never imagined the other two would appear as well. But this actually turned out even better than he had imagined. Myanmar walks over to him and speaks a little more quietly, saying that they may have an agreement, but she did not like the way he threatened her just now. However, the situation was not very favorable for her, so she could not play fair. Suddenly, an older man appears asking what this mess is and ordering the person responsible to reveal themselves immediately. The protagonist asks who that old man is and whether he is still a student at that age. Jiaoxi explains that he is the discipline master and that he hates people who cause trouble, so they might end up in big trouble. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.